So um, this is Gail Evans, Chair of the Finance and Administration Committee, calling our meeting to order on April 15th, 2025 at 1:04 p.m. Evan, would you please do a roll call?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Present.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Present.
Trustee Zook is excused, and Chair Evans.
Here.
We have quorum, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, we have a very full agenda today, so I'd like to thank our loyal committee members who were able to make it, and hopefully you've had a good chance to review the docket. This will be our first meeting with our new Vice President of Finance and Administration, KB. So welcome, about 1 month on the job, and you'll be guiding us through a lot of great information today. So we're happy to have you. We will be taking a break around 3:20 to make sure we can stretch and refresh before we conclude our meeting at 5 o'clock or possibly earlier. We also have a special guest today, Penny Burgess, who will be walking us through some significant updates to our policies and providing an investment update on the quasi-endowment and some recommendations for fund change. So this should be fun and a lot of good discussion today. So without further ado, I would like to move to the consent agenda and review the meeting minutes. And if there are no changes, then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which consists of our draft meeting minutes from the February 11th meeting.
I move to approve.
I second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez, Trustee Perez, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
I said aye.
Oh, thank you. Trustee Schwartzler
Aye.
and Chair Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Next, we'd like to have Camry Moreno, our Director of Budget and Planning, present to us the fiscal year 2025 management report. It's as of February 28th or March 31st, Camry?
March 31st. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
gotcha.
That was my error. I apologize, Chair.
Okay. And we'll review the management report as of March 31st.
And I am sorry, my computer just glitched. So I'm trying to get back up, and if you lose me, I apologize in advance. But thank you, Chair Evans, for turning it over to me. So our management report as of March 31st, 2025. So that's what we call period 9 of the fiscal year. And I am going to try and get this to cooperate for me. Things are continuing to look good. So this is for our education and general fund. And this is comparing where we are at as March 31st, 2025 to March 31st, 2024. So this point in time of this year to the same point in time as last year. You'll see that our tuition is trending about 1.4 million up. There's a couple of factors for this. One of them being that we had approximate 5% tuition increases last year. Overall enrollment was down approximately 3%, but if you look at our split between undergrad and graduate, our undergrad is trailing down that 3% and graduate's actually increasing as we progress in terms. And then graduate students do in general pay a higher tuition rate. So that kind of helps when you're looking at the gross tuition revenue. And then the other big factor that's helping boost that tuition revenue compared to last year is that we have our first cohort of occupational therapy students this year. And so they are contributing about 400,000 to 500,000 this year. So that's making a pretty significant difference too. Our online course fees are trending slightly down, about 300,000. This is due to that decrease in enrollment that we're seeing, as well as an effort to kind of decrease our online course offerings. Other fees are up. but this is somewhat of a timing discrepancy due to non-refundable tuition and fees. I think I mentioned this the last management report, but as a refresher, because it's kind of down in the details for you all, when students drop courses after week 2, it's non-refundable, and that moves to a clearing fund. Typically, that clearing fund is cleared on a quarterly basis, moving that revenue back in general fund, as is being done this year. But last year, with all the staff turnover and changes that we had, it wasn't done until the end of the fiscal year. So it's kind of changing a slight, variance. And when we're comparing where we're at this year to where we're at last year, a little bit of an unfair comparison when you're looking at the non-refundable tuition fees. So when you true up for that, we're actually just trending 60,000 less in other fees. And then fee remissions are slightly up as well, by about 200,000. If you look at our government resources and allocations, this is another comparison that isn't quite fair if you're taking it just at face value. It shows that we're down 73,000 from last year, but last year we had received just over $1 million of sustainability funds in that number. So if you take out the quote one-time sustainability funds and do that comparison, we're actually trending about $1 million up. I do say quote one time because we are getting the second tranche of sustainability funds, but that is being handled differently. Whereas tranche 1 came into general fund and is being reflected in these numbers, tranche 2 is being handled as a grant via HEC. So you don't see the tranche $2 reflected in this general fund report. Our gifts, grants, and contracts are trailing slightly up to about 126,000. This is mostly related to those grant indirects, which we will continue to watch closely, just given the climate and kind of the uncertainty relating to those grant indirects. But as of where we are at as period 9, we are still doing well there compared to last year. And then other revenue is pretty consistently on par, just a $26,000 difference. For personnel, you'll see that we're about 2.4 million more than last year. This is due to a combination of factors. Staffing levels are always slightly different if we had more or less variances or openings, between the years. But we've also had some significant COLAs and raises that have gone into effect. So our faculty have received an approximate 4% COLA. Unclassified was 3.25% mid-year. Classified staff received a 6.5% COLA, as well as some other ones that were staggered and making up differences. And then the other big factor behind that 2.4 million swing is our health benefit rate that we're paying also increased in this year, an approximate 13% increase in the rate between last year and this year. So all that adding up is leading to that 2.4 million. And then our services and supplies, I feel like I keep telling you the same thing every management report. It continues to be so volatile. Ever since COVID, this has been the hardest one for me to accurately predict for you all. So you'll note that we're about $1 million down. Looking at the reasons, there are some definite reasons why we've saved that $1 million this year. So last year there was some significant purchases for our occupational therapy program, about 200,000 for I'm going to not pronounce this right, anatomish table and however you say that, but for our occupational therapy program. And then we also had 50,000 of student meals for Destination Western, and some USSD payroll services, 72,000 that's now gone away, and we've brought that in-house. And we had a significant contract with EAB related to recruitment that was 380,000 that we're not doing this year. So a lot of that $1 million we do know are things that we were spending money on last year that we don't anticipate spending money on this year. But there are also new initiatives and things that are coming too. So I will continue to keep my eye on the services and supplies and update you to the very best of my ability where we think we're going to be coming in on that one. But altogether, when you're comparing general fund, our revenues and our expenses from this year to last year, again, at face value, it looks like we're very comparable. We're showing a 16.6, 16.7, a difference of just 100,000. But when you factor in that one time of the sustainability funds, as well as that difference in the non-refundable tuition, we're actually doing a bit better than we were last year. So about a 600,000 effective increase overall. Turning to our auxiliary fund, and still just going from the same point in time where we are this year to last year. And as a reminder, so our auxiliaries are all of those more what we call business type functions, more self-supportive. So athletics, housing, dining, bookstore, camp, all of our incidental fee funds, student health and counseling center, child development center, all of those. they also have a pretty significant accounting discrepancy that is making this comparison a little bit hard to take at face value, but I've got the details there for you. If you're looking at sales and services, you'll note that there's a 2.5 million increase this year than last year. But that is due to an accounting change of how dining is handling their revenue. In the past, they would get all of their meal plan revenue, and it would actually go into an unearned income, which is a liability account. So you wouldn't see it reflected in their revenue accounts until each month went on. Then they would book a portion of that earned revenue. This year they've changed the way that they've done it, and as soon as it is assessed, they're recognizing their revenue. This is similar to how we do things in the tuition and for our other categories. So while it creates quite a discrepancy for this year when we're comparing, going forward, it will simplify things and make things more efficient and take away some work that needed to be done to true that up. And then for personnel and services and supplies, you'll see that we're trailing slightly up on that as well, due to the same kind of similar factors for personnel, the raises and the health insurance that's gone up, and then services and supplies have also, mostly inflation is kind of driving those, as well as some increased expense for travel and athletics. And then last but not least, for the periodic, the designated operations service department and clearing funds. As a reminder, what this mostly is telecom, and as well as our Oregon Council of Presidents. On the revenues, you'll see that $884,000 decrease in enrollment fees. This is that flip side of the non-refundable tuition I was telling you about in general fund. So here you can see that last year it was still sitting out in this clearing fund, and this year it's not, because they have been clearing it. So that's kind of the big discrepancy driving the revenues there. Other revenues are slightly up this year in those funds. And then when you look at expenses, expenses are down in personnel, and that's mostly a result of the Oregon Council of Presidents has had some pretty significant vacancies there. So that's kind of driving there. As far as turning to our projections and where I think that we're going to end up for the year, for our revenues, you'll see that I'm projecting about 500,000 better on tuition and fees. The main driver of this, as far as the difference between budget, is our graduate enrollment has been interesting this year. Typically, we expect a 6% attrition between terms. So meaning, if you start with 100 students, we think we're going to have 94 students winter term and then 88-ish students spring term. This year, graduate student attrition has actually increased. So I am looking at full-time equivalencies. So either the graduate students that we have increased their credit load, or we've added some graduate students mid-year. So that's kind of what's the main driver behind that difference on the tuition fees. Government resources and allocations, we're projecting to be 84,000 under. This is just a result of the true up that came in after we set the adjusted budget. And then gifts, grants, and contracts, we're projecting to be higher, but again, what a lot of this is that indirects. And so as far as now, we're still trailing really good on our indirects and our grants, but there is a layer of uncertainty there. Only 3 months to go, but we'll see where we actually end up on that one. And then other revenue, we're trailing higher as well, another 468,000. And a lot of this is investment earnings. And so we've just been doing better than anticipated there. On our personnel, I'm projecting about 350,000 under budget. As a reminder, personnel this year, we did include the 1 million central salary savings that we've been doing for staff for a couple of years now, but we also added in 830,000 of central faculty savings. So this 350,000 is on top of those savings that we had already incorporated into the budget. And then services and supplies, I think I've given you all my disclaimers as why I think that, it's really hard to predict. But we're projecting 2.3 million under budget. Some of that I do think really will be for sure realized. One of the big pieces was the sustainability funds, tranche 1. We budgeted 500,000 of rollover this year in services and supplies. But by the time we got all caught up on the accounting and the tracking of the sustainability funds, we only needed, let me check my notes, 200,000 of the 500,000 that we budgeted for rollover. And then even more so, that 200,000 has all been spent. But whereas the budget was all sitting in the services and supplies category, some of the 200,000 that was spent, about 80,000 of it was actually spent out of personnel. And so all of that combined is about 380,000 savings in services and supplies from what we had budgeted of sustainability funds. This was a one-time budget anyway, so it was just a 1 year off, but that's contributing to that significant budgetary savings we're incorporating. And then there's a couple of other things too. If you recall way back, which I think some of you perhaps weren't even board members yet, but when we were approving the preliminary budget in June of last year, the president and we had incorporated several additions into the preliminary budget, but the president kept those on hold. He didn't kind of give senior leadership the authority to go forward with those, and he was kind of waiting to see where things have fallen. And so he ended up not ever releasing some of those things. So we have moved the budget out of the respective areas, but it's still reflected in the budget that was approved. And so that related results in another about 150,000 of SNS that was incorporated into the budget that was never actually given the go-ahead by the president to be spent. And then one more significant one just to kind of highlight for you was that occupational therapy. We talked about it, how, last year they had some significant purchases. This year too, we had budgeted in their one-time SNS budget for some more significant purchases, but they were able to find some other funding sources as well as get better deals than kind of what they had projected. And so we're projecting about 200,000 of SNS savings too from occupational therapy. So add all that together, looking at our net transfers, we do think we're going to come in over budget there. We're going to have to subsidize athletics about 600,000 more than what was, or excuse me, 500,000 more than what was originally budgeted. But adding all that in, we still are on track to do significantly better than what we budgeted for. So we had budgeted a $4.6 million deficit. That was 3.5 million recurring, about 1.1 one-time. And we think that as of right now, our best guess is that we're going to be closer to a $1.3 million deficit. So looking at what that does to our fund balance, we're projecting a just under 12.5 million, or 16.77% of, sorry, 16.77% fund balance as a percentage of revenues. Looking at our auxiliaries, projecting them out too, things are looking better for them on the revenue side, but as is typical for our auxiliaries, just because they are kind of that more business type, is when they're doing better on their revenues, their expenses are also going up, with them, a lot of them being directly tied as far as, purchasing food to then resell the food. So we think that they're going to come in about 1.6 million better than budget, but we also think that they're going to come in about 1.6 million worse on expenses. So altogether, though, they're still holding pretty strong when you add in the transfer. We think that they're going to actually come to the positive rather than we had an adjusted budget that was a negative deficit. Our auxiliaries were hit as we all, but COVID, they had depleted a lot of their reserves. And so a lot of our individual auxiliaries are still really trying to rebuild their reserves and get them back to a healthier level. And then last but not least, as ops and clearing funds, again, these are coming on pretty on budget. On the expense side, we do think that there's probably going to be some savings, and almost all of those savings are living in that Oregon Council of Presidents specific designated operation. With that, if anyone has any questions, or if KB wants to add anything that I missed, or...
No, thank you. Thank you for your hard work on this. I think you are on the road, and I don't have anything to add.
Any other comments or questions from our trustees? Thank you for that overview. We get better every time we meet, Tamara. We appreciate the the redundancy. It helps. It's good to see us moving in a better direction. I mean, certainly a deficit is not where we want to be for sustainability, but I can appreciate how everyone is looking for ways to reduce cost, hold off on some expenditures, be smarter about how we find the things we need to do what we do, and it really is showing, and I do tremendously appreciate that. So we can't complain about this report. And I know it's hard to budget. So let's just hope that at the end of this fiscal year or academic year that we don't have a run on supplies. People don't say, hey, I have some budget left, let me go out and buy this or that. So I'm hoping that there will be some moderation in place, and that this trend will hold through. for our year-end financials. So thank you for that update. Um, well, we do have a staff recommendation here then that we approve and accept, but we should, that we accept the projected year-end report and the overall management report as of March 31st. If there are no other questions or comments, I would like to entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, let's go ahead with a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez?
Actually, sorry, I do have one question that was just I was trying to figure out how to ask it in my head here. So, so one of the areas that we're displaying pretty well is, I'll just say the P&L. Is there kind of like a trending report? Like when we look at it, here's your beginning point, here's your end point, where we're trending year over year from kind of a trend status. And if we're truly at a net zero or a negative, how long can we be negative before we need to pull some other triggers?
That's a
I'll get
great,
started, KB, and maybe you'll jump in. We certainly do have some internal trend reports. We don't have a history of showing those to the board, although we certainly could. We do also, I wanted to say the budget dashboard has some of those graphs that show the trends that I think maybe will help. And I think the budget dashboard is towards the end of the agenda today, so we can go through those and talk about potentially enhancing that too, if there's anything that we think is missing.
Okay.
So we have the data available.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, go ahead.
would it be helpful to pop over to that to the dashboard while it's on our minds and we don't switch gears into a bunch of investment policies? If I could deviate from the agenda a little bit.
Sure, I guess we could count this as discussion real quick.
Yes,
Parliamentary procedure, why not? It's
why not?
relevant.
This is discussion and relevant now. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, Kemery, you want to walk us through these slides?
Yes, thank you. So I've got quite a few here, and I think, Chair Evans, I think I maybe have added something that I hadn't notified you of too. So maybe a slight surprise in here. So this first one is undergraduate enrollment. This is, I always disclaim, unofficial enrollment data. I normally look at things differently than what our official IR and other offices do. A lot of that is based on 4th week Friday, which is census. As far as our financial perspective, first Friday of the term is the last day for 100% refund. Second Friday is last day for 50% refund. And then after that, we keep the revenue. So normally when we're talking about it from a financial or a budget perspective, I always report on second term Friday enrollment. And so that's what you see here. What else is different is a lot of times we talk mostly about fall enrollment when we're speaking about enrollment for a year. And here we have each term, fall, winter, and spring. So kind of shows the drop off, that 6% attrition that we normally budget, and then it typically spikes up in the fall, although for us, even when it spikes up in the fall, it's typically lower than the last fall, although we have turned it a little bit. So this is the undergraduate enrollment graph. Here is graduate enrollment, which I think also speaks to the management report. Much more volatile. It's also a much smaller amount of students for us, but you can see some of the spikes and everything, whereas undergraduate was a pretty, predictable pattern. Graduate is a little more wild, not quite so predictable. This would be gross tuition and remissions. And so this kind of just shows the history that even though we have been doing steadily tuition increases over the year, our actual gross tuition has decreased. It also shows kind of the variance in our fee remissions as well as our fee remissions percentage. Typically, over the years, we've trended around 15% of remissions, but it's moved a little bit. And that really just kind of illustrates the impact that the decrease in enrollment that we've had has had on our overall gross tuition. Here's net tuition and fees per FTE. So just kind of trying to illustrate how much we are actually getting per each student. It's It's kind of hovered around the 9,000. It's slightly decreased. Some of this difference is because this is net of the fee remissions. So even though some years our tuition rate has gone up, our fee remissions have gone up at a higher percentage. And so we are actually netting. But overall, we get just under 10 for undergraduate and approximately 17 for graduate. This will likely kind of change dramatically over the next few years as that occupational therapy. It's a 3-year program, so as we kind of phase in the cohorts and get that up to fully running, that will probably change the picture of this graph. Cost per FTE, this is how much we're spending as a university out of the general fund. And you can see the steady increases there. You'll see a slight drop in 21. This correlates to the significant budget cuts we were doing around COVID times, but kind of that inflationary adjustment as well as all of our different costs have been increasing over the years.
Quick question, that cost per FTE, is that in dollars or thousands?
Dollars.
Okay, just making sure.
Like, always a good question because I do have I go back and forth on you.
Yeah.
E&G fund balance has a percentage of revenues, so I think this maybe is getting more into some of your questions. So the blue bar chart is our total revenues over the year. You can see that we've been kind of, increasing, also drops over time. And then our fund balance would be the red line. The dotted lines are our upper and lower bounds. So as a reminder, it is your policy that our general fund balance as a percentage of revenue is between 5 and 15 with a target of 10 to 12%. And so you can see that we've kind of hovered on the upper end of that boundary, which also has then given us kind of the runway that we have as we've been in that deficit mode the last few years. Our E&G expenses, again, trendlined over the year. You can see that they've gone up, and then we've had kind of that significant budget cut again in FY21 was when we did a $5 million budget cuts, or excuse me, not that was the first round of budget cuts that we did in FY21. So you see the slight drop and then an increase, and then in FY23 you see another slight drop was when we had our next round of budget cuts. But overall the trend has been up without, kind of the intentional budget reductions on the expense side. This is the 5-year sustainability plan. Kind of maybe perhaps not the best graphical representation, but if you recall, back in fiscal year 23, we came up with a plan that was the 5-year financial sustainability plan to get us to a balanced budget by the end of those 5 years. We have been working on an updated plan. Mike Green started that when he was here, and KB has been carrying that on. So I think we hopefully will maybe have a new plan to map out for you all. But so far as the original plan, although we haven't necessarily been on track as far as the deficit and getting to the heart of that problem looking at next year, we have been able to maintain our fund balance at a rate that was better than the 5-year plan, just due to those one-time savings and other influx of money.
Sorry, NWCCU stands for?
It's our creditors. Northwest, it's our creditors. I will look that up.
Okay, no
Or if
worries.
Evan or someone does. And I think this is the new addition that I don't think anyone has necessarily seen yet. So this is our ratios. We had talked about looking at our different ratios as a kind of a benchmark. And so I had added those in. Chad and Lehman helped prepare all of the data off of the financial statements, but kind of showing the different measures. I included the whole explanation here just because a lot of times when you're looking at financial ratios, there's always slightly different ways to compute them. So this is kind of giving the big disclaimer, but you can see our current ratio has declined over the years.
And Trustee Perez, I was going to say it, but a few of our colleagues have put it in the chat. It's the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, our accreditor, our accreditation body.
Thank you. Our primary reserve percentage, so you can see again kind of a drop and then an increase, and now we're kind of sliding along. So this is looking at our assets that we can quickly access. I'm using my cheat notes here right off to the side. But so that is this.
So Cam,
Yes.
so trustee asked about where we should wave the flag, like where so this primary reserve ratio as a higher education standard calls for 40% as the standard. So whenever your ratio is below 40%, it's a cause for alarm. So that is one of the measures or the dashboard that should be looked at critically.
Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it.
And just kind of quickly going through these, I think we're almost at the end of the dashboard data. Return on net asset percentage, and this one is pretty volatile if you see too, as it goes between the negatives and the expenses. And our viability ratio, so this is our kind of a measure of liquidity. All of this is available at any time out on the budget dashboard too, if you want to more quickly than I just kind of was flipping you through, if you ever want to go out and look at it. It's just wou.edu/budget, and then there's a budget dashboard link too.
Thank you. I think that was worthwhile discussion, especially for our newer trustees who are presented information kind of in a one-year time horizon versus the big picture of trend. And so you can see that while the trend is improving, we're not where we need to be, and it's going to require a lot of additional work. And it really could impact some of our conversation later around investment policy and objectives in terms of knowing what we're dealing with here in terms of the deficit and resources available to the universities. So I appreciate that little detour for discussion. Thank you for legitimizing that, Evan.
Chair, real quick, I think it might be worthwhile to have a conversation with our finance and administration team to maybe just integrate that dashboard into our management report, because I mean, as we did it, I was thinking this makes sense
Yes.
to get that update as part of the management report.
Yeah, I
so
would
that-
second that. Yeah, I like the zoom in and then zoom back out, so I know like the zoom in is great, but I also want to see the big picture so I know what I'm approving.
Yeah, and then you all get that coverage before you make the vote. So I appreciate the feedback, and we'll work with KB and Camry and the team to integrate that as part of future management reports. So we
I
do
think that's great.
have a motion on the table, Chair.
All right, we have a motion, a second, and we've had discussion, so let's do a roll call vote.
All right, thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Aye.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Aye.
Chair Evans.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Excellent. All right, so now we are going to do a quick time check. No, not bad. All right. So now we're going to move to our guest presenter to talk with us about the quasi-endowment. And hand in hand with that, it prompted us to review our overall board statement for the quasi-endowment and the potential to create the board statement on investment of operating assets. And we also know that we had a fund that was underperforming, and we had tasked our investment advisor to come back to us with a recommendation on how to replace that fund. So we have a big picture and a zoom in picture on this topic as well. But with that, I would like to turn it over to Penny, who's hopefully patiently still online.
I am. Thank you, Chair Evans, and good afternoon, trustees. Well, as Chair Evans indicated, first we're going to talk about the board statement on the investment of quasi-endowment funds and some recommended changes to this policy. And the changes are really focusing on standardizing the policy language, on clarifying roles and responsibilities, and also include some new provisions that are important components of investment policies. So prior to submitting these materials for the committee's review, I did share our recommendations with KB for feedback and any desired changes. So the recommendations in your docket do assume the purpose of the funds, the investment objective, and the time horizon remain the same as originally outlined in the board statement. However, as Chair Evans indicated, this committee and the board may decide the intended purpose of the quasi-endowment fund and the investment time horizon will be shorter than currently stated in the policy. And those changes will likely impact the asset allocation, the target performance returns, and the recommended investment managers. So in a few minutes, I will share 3 separate asset allocation scenarios with varying investment time horizons to help guide the asset allocation discussion. Yes, and if you want to zoom forward to page 24, that would be fantastic. Perfect, thank you. So what is an investment policy and why is it important? Well, investment policies state general investment goals and objectives, and they provide very important guidelines for the selected investment managers to employ in order to meet the investment policy objectives. So important provisions and statements include the purpose of the assets, the investment objective, the time horizon for investment, and the risk tolerance. And once these parameters are confirmed, then the asset allocation and the investment return targets can be established, followed then by the hiring of the investment managers. So the current portfolio objective is a moderate growth over a mid or intermediate term time period. Performance goals target a 5% rate of return over 5-year periods while covering inflation and fees. And the asset allocation targets align with a balanced portfolio approach, allocating 55% to global equities, 40% to fixed income, and 5% to cash. Now, as of December 31st of 2024, the 5-year average annual performance return of 5.1% meant the performance goals, resulting in an excess 2.1% performance after covering inflation and fees. And I have a preliminary update for March 31st of 2025 returns. So the 5-year average annual return through March 31st was 8%. So again, meeting that 5% goal, resulting in an excess return of 5.1%. So why the big variance between the December quarter and the March quarter? The good news is that horrific March 2020 quarter of the negative equity stock market declines has now rolled off of the 5-year returns, which helps to improve that annualized performance return. So I'm going to briefly discuss the changes in each section. You're welcome to stop me and ask questions as we go along, and then there should be some time at the end to ask additional questions. So starting with section 1, the purpose of the investment portfolio, it's been updated to provide guiding investment principles that are standard language in investment policies. Section 2, organization fiduciary, has been renamed to fiduciary responsibilities, and the fiduciary responsibilities of the board are clearly defined in section 2. Section 3, investment objective. The current investment objective is a balanced portfolio approach with a moderate growth investment objective. And as Cam Marie pointed out, and I understand KB and the team are preparing a 5-year financial plan that may require some additional resources to meet funding needs in later years of the plan. So if the committee and the board determine the quasi-endowment may be a source of funding, then the investment objective, the time horizon, and the asset allocation may require adjustment. I'm going to sound like a broken record because I'm going to repeat this over to you a few times throughout this. Section 4, time horizon. In this section, you can see where the time horizon was defined as mid, but unspecified. So we've updated this section to say intermediate term. This typically implies a 5 to 7 year or longer investment time horizon. So this section is important for that portfolio construction or even asset liability matching if there are uses of the funds. So if the investments are structured to assume a reasonable risk for 5 years or longer, and it's then later decided that these funds are needed, say in less than 12 months, during a period of real heightened volatility in equities or fixed income, it's possible the value of the assets will be less than originally anticipated. So all this to say, it's really helpful to have that strong sense of what the overall objective and time horizon is for planning purposes. Section 5, targeted rate of return. The 5% average annual rate of return is reasonable if the investment objective, time horizon, and asset allocation remain unchanged. Section 6, strategic asset allocation. So here we've consolidated the asset classes for equities into global equities, and we've modified the minimum asset allocation bands to support the balanced portfolio approach, leaving the target allocations unchanged with the 55% to global equities, 40% to fixed income, and 5% to cash. The changes to the asset allocation may be required, again, if the parameters discussed previously change. And I want to point out, mea culpa here, I have an error in the benchmarks added. So you'll see in this table, I added an additional column identified as benchmark for each asset class. And for global equities, it should say MSCI ACWI. So that means the Morgan Stanley Capital Indices All Country World Index. What I mistakenly put in there is the proper benchmark for developed international equities. However, the current benchmark being used today for global equities is the MSCI All Country World Index. So that would require a change. So I want to take just a couple minutes and jump forward to the attachment 3, which I believe is on page 32. I'm going to talk through the asset allocation scenarios. Perfect. So due to the termination of the Western Asset Core Plus Bond Manager, the fixed income allocation is currently 0% to fixed income as the assets are on deposit in cash with the Oregon State Treasury in their Oregon Short-Term Fund. And once the fixed income manager is selected, then the portfolio would be aligned with scenario A and the asset allocation target stated in the policy. But again, if it's anticipated that a portion or all of these funds may be used for university purposes in less than 5 years, say in a 3 or 4 year time period, we recommend a more conservative portfolio approach, such as scenario B, that would allocate 30% to equities, 35% to fixed income, and 35% to cash. Or if it's anticipated that a portion or all of the funds may be used for university purposes in 2 years or less, then we'd recommend scenario C with a goal of capital preservation and allocating all of those assets to cash. And you can see here, I've included a column called return assumptions. So based upon long-term capital market assumptions from BlackRock Asset Management, we've provided here an average annual return assumption for each of these scenarios. So capital market assumptions are useful as guides, but rarely are they good predictors of market returns in the short term, sometimes not that great over the long term. These assumptions are based upon 10-year return assumptions. So for scenario A, 5.9%, the current policy has return expectations of 5%. When we modeled this out back in 2018, 5%, I think it was really about 5.5%, was the modeled return assumption. That's because fixed income returns due to much lower interest rates. So those fixed income return assumptions were less than they are today, given the slightly higher interest rate environment. But I would say, continue to say, if scenario A remains the primary asset allocation and supports the longer term investment objective, then a 5% target rate of return continues to make sense. Scenario B, so allocating a little less to equities would have a higher longer term performance trend and a little more than to fixed income and cash, just reduces that potential return, average annual return, to 5.2%. And then in scenario C, 100% to cash, long-term average assumptions are about 4% for cash returns. Now, in certain years, it may be less than 4%. In other years, it might be slightly higher than 4%. But truly, many economists out there and strategists believe that interest rates, and particularly rates on cash deposits, have normalized compared to years following the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So very decent returns on cash at approximately 4%. Any questions on asset allocation before we move back to the rest of the sections in the policy? Okay, so back to section 6, if we could, just the end of section 6. So the current policy includes a statement about investing in accordance with socially responsible investing. Though I will say that this statement is quite vague. So to date, socially responsible investing has not been incorporated into the investment strategy. If that's something that is important to this committee and to the board, I would recommend a future discussion and some work on development of a framework that would be helpful to really provide the list of values that are important to Western Oregon University associated with socially responsible investing that would provide then better guidelines for investment managers. I think one note for consideration is when you incorporate in socially responsible investing, it oftentimes the universe of investment managers is fewer. The investment minimums can be much higher than the assets that Western currently has available and under management. And the fees associated with that management can be higher, but certainly a conversation that happy to engage in if there's interest. Section 7, titled Fiscally and Socially Responsible Investing. Since we moved the socially responsible up to section 6, we've retitled this as investment restrictions. And there's an addendum to the board statement to this policy. And so we've pulled in all of the items from the addendum here into section 7. So 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 are all of the items that were listed on the addendum, restrictions around cash, fixed income, and equities. Section 8, portfolio rebalancing. So to provide clarity on roles, we've changed references from the investment consultant to the investment advisor. And in this case, Oregon State Treasury is the investment advisor to Western Oregon for the quasi-endowment. And then we've moved the second sentence of this section to a new section in 13 regarding the cadence of policy review. Section 9, manager review. We've changed the reference again from investment consultant to investment advisor to clarify the roles. And then in section 10, several changes here to help clarify roles. We've changed references from the investment manager to the investment advisor, and we've eliminated the investment consultant role. As indicated, the investment advisor is currently the Oregon State Treasury. Investment managers are BlackRock for global equities. In just a few minutes, we'll talk about potential managers for fixed income. And then the Oregon State Treasury serves as the manager for cash position. And USSE and my treasury management team, through our statement of work with Western Oregon University, we serve as consultant to the university and the board on investment policy, investment due diligence, investment reporting, and investment accounting. So the first bullet under section 10.2 here states the investment advisor and or designee serves as consultant to the board and the VPFA. So USSE fills that designee role or reference and at any time as requested by the VPFA or by the Finance and Administration Committee, happy to interact and provide recommendations regarding investment and policy. And then if we can go back up just to section 10.1 and look at that first bullet, we've edited the first bullet here to state the board approves the investment advisor So we've removed the approval of the investment managers and eliminated here the investment consultant. And here I would highly recommend to the committee considering delegating the approval of the investment managers, so those individual equity fixed income managers, to the VPFA. And that would then be included in section 10.3. I did not include a separate bullet, but you'll see I have a call out comment there about delegating that authority to the VPFA. That eliminates the need for the board to weigh in on decisions to terminate investment managers or the hiring of replacement managers. And then it's the VPFA's responsibility or the designee's responsibility to provide those updates to the board of any investment manager hire or fire decisions. And then sections 11, 12, and 13 are all new to this policy, but they're important components of a standard investment policy that cover the prudent investor rule, ethics, conflicts of interest, and asset custody. And then in section 13, the current statement indicated that this policy would be reviewed on an annual basis, which is perfectly fine. Best practice is every 2 years. And so I've moved that in as a best practice. And what I can say is certainly if the investment advisor, if USSE were providing any new recommendations, or if the committee had any requests for changes to the policy, it certainly could be brought earlier than that 2-year mark. That concludes my comments regarding this policy, so happy to open it up to questions.
Penny, could we go to 7.0? And this, under fixed income, the second bullet item,
Yes.
it just seems like, can you explain that to me?
Yes, so the average credit quality should not be lower than 1 grade below the approved fixed income benchmark. So if the approved fixed income benchmark is right now a AA credit, then it's just saying that the overall credit rating for the fixed income portfolio or managers should not be less than a single A.
And why do we give ourselves that flexibility?
Allowing for that flexibility, particularly in the last 5 years, has been extremely helpful for fixed income managers. Really, I could probably extend it out for 10 years. There has been a pretty good ability to add additional value, additional return by utilizing, say, BBB rated securities, single A rated securities. The spreads on your highest quality have been so tight for so many years that there just hasn't been tremendous value. But when you start to go down in quality just slightly, that has been the sweet spot for fixed income managers for several years now. And that's certainly because we haven't had a recession since the short recession in 2020. And since then, we've had very good economic environment. And because of that, that's really led for that tightening of the spreads. And when I say tightening of spreads, it's the interest rate or the coupon on bonds with a high rating versus a slightly lower credit rating. And so allowing for that, Chair Evans really allows for that potential for the managers to add just a slight bit of additional return.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In section 10, we have the role of the university president, VPFA, and designees. One of the areas that was unclear was who was responsible for making sure the quarterly reports got onto the agenda and that this policy was administered and implemented as intended. And so it seems like we might need a bullet item just in general to make that the responsibility of the management team to make sure that this statement and activities are implemented and carried out appropriately.
So adding another bullet that would indicate performance returns will be provided to the Finance and Administration Committee on a quarterly basis. You want to have it something as detailed as that?
Well, I'll just speak from a layperson's point of view is I think we should be able to rely on management to give us the quarterly reports, to let us know what's on a watch list, to bring recommendations forward for replacement funds. I know that that the analysis work is done by the investment people, the advisors, the consultants, the designees. But somebody's got to bring that beyond point to keep bringing that back to the committee so that we have the visibility, we can discharge our duties. Because if we don't have that information, those reports and that structure, it's going to be hard for us to fulfill our role.
Sure.
I don't disagree with our role. I just want to make sure
Sure.
it's clear who's on point to get us the information we need to carry it out.
Understood. And my understanding is the materials, the quarterly reports may have been included in the materials, but is my understanding correct? There wasn't necessarily a separate agenda item to review that information with this committee. Is that correct?
Which surprised me, but apparently it was more at the discretion of the VPFA what actually came as a discussion item. I know we would approve or we would accept the reports, but accepting a report is different than the monitoring and the fiduciary oversight
Sure.
that's expected.
And would you want that on a, I mean, certainly the materials are available on a quarterly basis. How frequently would you want either the VPFA or USSE or even the Oregon State Treasury to come and provide a report to this committee?
My suggestion would be if we have something anomalous going on, an outlier or a fund on the watch list, or if things are not operating as expected, then that requires a little more discussion and opportunities to ask questions, in my opinion. That's just, I don't know how the other trustees feel, but I don't mind approving something if it's all working according to plan and targets and benchmarks and philosophy and objectives, then we just need a report. But if we have a deviation from a target or performance or fund, that's when we need to make sure it comes up for discussion. Because I'm not sure it's fair to ask the committee to go through those quarterly reports and go, aha, wait a minute, this is an outlier. I need to pull this out of a consent agenda to talk,
Yeah, Trustee Evans, I'm wondering if, and quarterly it to some degree feels like it's a little too frequent unless there is, like you said, there's something that needs to be flagged or addressed specifically. Yeah, so I don't, but from a clarity standpoint, or, is it just as easy to keep something on the agenda as a standing item and then you just, if there's really nothing to say, you just kind of, it's a 5-second agenda item or a 10-second agenda item, but it's a good reminder maybe to have that there.
Chair Evans, I do think it's important to note that this conversation, so the investment updates you would receive as part of the VPFA report. And if you remember, historically, it's been Darren, before he retired, would give a quick update and he would essentially read the report that Penny typed, I assume it was Penny, typed up for Darren on a quarterly basis and kind of gave an overall update. And then gave opportunity for questions. But you are right in the context of it's a snapshot in time that was attached to the docket, and it wasn't something that was particularly called out as its own agenda item. But you were receiving it as part of the larger VPFA report and was in some ways called out. It was a sub item of the VPFA report.
And I can share with you, for other committees, they do request my attendance on an annual basis to review performance, review it versus policy. And then they oftentimes will invite me, when they're reviewing the investment policy, as we're doing here today, to provide any recommendations. And I am engaged with the Oregon State Treasury, definitely on a quarterly basis, and here more recently, it's been on a monthly basis. So I'm always aware, and to the extent there's interest from this committee, I know that they would be happy to provide a presentation and an update and allow you opportunity to ask questions as well. So please know that that's available to you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the comments, and if we feel like this policy is enough to give us what we need and the attention it deserves. I think quarterly is also probably too frequent. So maybe that language needs to be, we only meet four or five times a year. So I just want to make sure that the language we have in here is language that we can live up to, and we have someone on point to make sure it happens.
Do we need to put any metrics around the quarterly? So if it goes below a certain percentage, that would be one that we want to flag?
I think there would be a lot of different reasons something might be flagged for further discussion.
Would that already be summarized though in the report? Is it, I guess my question is it just a matter of us going out and looking for it versus having it kind of proactively flagged for discussion?
And it's a great question. So we do try to summarize in the report the investment performance. Quarterly can be a pretty short period of time for equity and fixed income markets. That's why we traditionally like to look over a 1-year period. Because certainly any investment manager, a strategy could be off in a particular quarter or even in a particular year. But when we look at longer term time periods, they're still meeting the overall investment objective.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate the feedback. I agree. I believe having the quarterly materials is important. But I would say really trying to benchmark and measure whether it's meeting the objectives on an annual basis and then over longer term performance periods of that 3 to 5 year periods are the critical measurements.
Okay. Other comments or questions about the policy? Our custodian oversight, who is responsible for that?
So through the Oregon State Treasury, their custodian is State Street. And so State Street, one of the top custodians in the United States, is made available to Western Oregon for no additional fee, which is fantastic. It's included in the state's 3 basis point fee. And so if you were to select an investment advisor outside of the state treasury, then that custodian fee, so searching for a custodian, establishing that relationship and that fee would be an added cost. So it's a great benefit that the
Yes.
state provides.
Yes. Okay, well, hearing no further discussion, should we, Evan, is this policy then we would recommend to the board for approval? And we would need a motion to recommend this policy as, I guess I would ask KB, should we how do you feel about the VP of Finance and Administration being able to do this work in the comments of 10.3? I think that's delegating the discretion to you.
I think it's in order because essentially, if we need to terminate or we need to reappoint an investment manager, there will be a discussion with Penny, and it's likely we will find a way to circle back to you before we make that decision. But having the discretion to be able to do that, I think it's in order.
Mhm. And to do so in a timely way, because we don't meet on a regular basis.
Yes,
frequent
so
basis.
yeah, so we can reach you through text. So whenever something comes up that we need to get in touch with you, we will be able to get in touch with you and let you know so that we can share out the move so that we can effect the change we need to effect.
Yeah, and Chair Evans, just for context, this would be a recommend to the board. And our board meeting is in, well, this part of the board meeting is in 8 days, so it's going to be a pretty close, tight turnaround. So we'll have to, I'll communicate to the board if this gets approved to really spend some time looking at this. And Penny, would you have availability to at least zoom in to the board meeting on Wednesday in case folks have additional questions for you?
And sorry, this is Wednesday, what date?
Sorry, it's Wednesday the 23rd. So like next Wednesday. This was a really tight timeline here.
Yes, I could definitely do that next Wednesday.
And we can, well, I'll work with you to make sure that it's a time that works best for you throughout.
Okay.
Our board meetings from 10 to 3 that day. So we'll work and find a time to make sure that you're available.
Great.
But that would be my recommendation, Chair, is a recommend, and then we will have this as an action item instead of consent, so we can have a real robust conversation, if you're comfortable with that.
I am, because we'll need to bring the fund change to the board as well.
Right.
So, okay, so are there any other placeholders, trustees, Perez and Schwartzler, are you comfortable adding the language that's proposed in the comments here? And are there any other adjustments to this policy you would like to make before we approve it?
This looks good to me.
Yeah, it looks good to me. I think we had one question up top, though, maybe it's at the very beginning for around funding itself. Yeah, it was the right there, I think. Socially responsible investing. Did we need to clarify that?
I think, yeah, if I may, Chair Evans, I think that might be a conversation that we, senior leadership has, and maybe brings back some recommendations if that's the will of the committee, is to come back with a recommendation of that. But I think it's definitely worth a conversation at a future meeting.
Yeah, I think that requires a lot more discussion, so I wouldn't make it part of this policy per se right now, unless the May elect could allow for flexibility. I'm not opposed to it, but I am aware of the limitations that Penny shared with us, and then there's, you know, there's just the whole definition around what do we consider socially responsible.
Yeah, or is it something else? You know, maybe it's not socially responsible, it's investment restrictions, you know.
That's a good perspective, yes. Mhm.
I do have one question though. Is the committee comfortable that the current strategy around this intermediate term time horizon, this balanced approach will remain consistent Or is there still a question mark around whether or not some of these assets may be utilized for funding purposes sometime in the next 1 to 4 years?
Mm.
Given the financials we've seen and the trends we've seen, I personally think a scenario B might be more appropriate at this time, but I would like to hear from the other trustees.
I agree.
That one seemed more of a safe side to me too as well, B.
Yep. Agree.
Chair, can we ask for KB's perspective on this?
Yes, I would welcome that.
I think that is in order. I think the same way.
Okay.
Slightly more conservative, but not 100% cash is where I see it. Okay.
Definitely.
And that's helpful because then I would say the overall investment objective, we would tone that down from a balanced approach to a more conservative approach as well. So
Yes.
I think a couple of tweaks in terms of terminology would be required.
Okay. Yes, and with the 2-year timeline of reviewing this policy, we may be in a different risk position when we review it again. So, and we're 2 years out on our plan for sustainability as well.
Yeah, that's helpful feedback for sure. I think that's important feedback.
Okay. Okay, so with the clarification of our move to a conservative position, giving more authority to our VPFA, I think that's all in terms of language that would need to be adjusted before this goes to the board. So is it reasonable then to have a motion to approve, to recommend this policy to the board with the changes as discussed?
Yes, Chair, if I can add one more clarification that I need to ask Penny. The correction on the table, if you can just send it in an email. I wrote the note, but I just don't want to get the acronym wrong. So if you could just
Yes.
email it to me, I'll make sure the right one is in there.
I will. And Evan, I'll make some of the other adjustments
Thank you.
to the policy that have been discussed today by the committee.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
So then, yes, Chair, the motion to recommend this to the full board would be appropriate.
Do we have a motion?
I motion it to move forward to the board.
Second.
Any more discussion? All right, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Aye.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Aye.
Chair Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Penny. Now on to the fund change discussion.
Yes, thank you again. So we're going to talk about fixed income fund manager recommendation. And if we could move forward to page 40. Thank you. So as you will recall, we did receive approval from the board to liquidate the Western Asset Core Plus bond fund from the quasi endowment. This was in December of 2024, and this was due to concerns over lack of internal controls by Western Asset, as well as the relative underperformance. And Western Oregon University's investment advisor, Oregon State Treasury, has provided here a variety of passive and active core and active core plus fixed income manager options for investment of those proceeds. And USSE staff have reviewed and performed due diligence on the investment options on the basis of the product offering, of the people and their process or the investment team, their performance and fees. And we've narrowed the options to 2 fixed income fund manager recommendations, but based upon what I just heard in the conservative approach for the investment objective, I'm only going to talk about one manager that's applicable, and that's the JP Morgan Active Core Bond Manager. And so The JP Morgan Core Bond Fund Manager, it's a traditional core bond fund manager with a very long-term track record of performance. It's held up very well over time, supported by a seasoned portfolio management team, as well as a deep bench of credit analysts. Strategy focuses on owning high-quality bonds with a significant amount allocated to the highest credit rating bonds, the AAA, the AAA rated category. Many longtime fixed income fund managers are now launching exchange traded fund options, so via brokerage accounts for their active fixed income strategies. This allows for real-time trading as opposed to the historical mutual fund strategies, which still remain good investment options. But as we know, mutual funds, they trade once during the day after the close of the market, after their daily net asset value has been struck. So the Oregon State Treasury has updated account options with their custodian, State Street, allowing Western Oregon to obtain exposure to active fixed income strategies using these exchange traded funds or ETFs. The manager fees are quite compelling in the ETF options, and for JP Morgan, it's 25 basis points or 0.25%. This is compared to their peer group of 25 to 40 basis points. And as we've already talked about, the goal is to focus on a more conservative investment approach. This JP Morgan does have a less volatile strategy and a lower risk profile, and therefore would be a great option for that change in investment strategy. It launched its ETF option just over 2 years ago, so it doesn't have a long-term performance track record for the ETF, but its companion mutual fund strategy, which I've included here down below in the italics, it has a long-term track record. Its 3-year average annual performance increased 90 basis points or 0.9% as of March 31st. Outperforming its benchmark by 40 basis points, and its 5-year average annual performance was a positive 30 basis points, outperforming its benchmark by 70 basis points. So I appreciate those returns are nothing to get very excited about, and just a heavy reminder that in 2022 and 2023, as the interest rates were rising quite dramatically to help confront the rising inflation, when interest rates are rising, the prices of your bonds are doing just the opposite. They're declining. And so there was significant declines in the bonds and the underlying portfolios, and the reason for this very muted performance return. And so with that, that concludes my comments, because I'm not going to take any time to talk about the Fidelity total bond return. It would be much more appropriate if assets were going to be invested for potentially longer than 5 years. Any questions, comments, or feedback, or more questions on the due diligence process?
Thank you for that clear recommendation. Any comments, discussion? All right. So with that, we will need a motion to approve this recommendation for the Fidelity Total Bond ETF. Did I get that right?
The JP Morgan.
I'm sorry, the JP Morgan Active Core Bond ETF. And this would be a recommend to the board for approval.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
I move to recommend the JP Morgan Active Core Bond EFT for approval of the board.
I second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Aye.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Aye.
and Chair Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yay. All right. Next up, a new board statement on the investment of operating assets. And this is something that we will be recommending to the board as well. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review it. Penny, are you the drafter of this one as well?
Yes, I am, and happy to walk the committee through this.
Okay.
So thank you,
Please
Chair
do.
Evans. And as indicated, Western Oregon does not have an investment policy or a liquidity policy to guide the investment of operating assets today. So we've drafted this investment policy for the committee's review and feedback. Just a reminder, goal of the investment policy is to provide guidelines for suitable investments, and it defines the investment objective for the university's assets. This policy is intended to cover only the operating assets, does not include retirement assets, does not include the quasi-endowment fund assets, nor does it include any funds managed by the university's foundation. Within the investment policy, we have explicitly defined the correlation between the investment time horizon and the investment objective by using tier classifications. So the investment portfolio is currently managed today using this tier approach. Tier 1 investments are short-term investments. These are most liquid investments such as cash, cash equivalents, and short-term fixed income instruments. Tier 2 investments are permitted investments with an overall maturity between 1 and 10 years. These investments include fixed income securities such as the Public University Fund Core Bond Fund, which the university has allocated assets into. And then Tier 3 are longer term investments that can tolerate greater risk with the expectation to hold these assets for a longer period of time to maximize investment returns. Equities and long-term bonds are typical holdings in this category. Today, Western does not allocate any excess assets into Tier 3, but we've included it here for future optionality. And these definitions, as well as definitions applicable, other definitions applicable to this policy, such as the liquidity and prudent money management, are included in Section 1. So Section 2, the roles and responsibility of the board, the president, the VPFA, and any other university staff who may have responsibilities for investment of operating assets are defined here in Section 2. The expectation is the daily responsibilities for implementation of this policy will be delegated to the VPFA. Section 3, the primary investment objective is defined as preservation of capital, particularly for the assets held to meet the liquidity needs. The investment objective by 3 liquidity tiers is defined. So talked about it a little bit, but I'll go over it again here. Tier 1 assets, the most liquid, the safest investment options with a short-term investment horizon. Tier 2 assets anticipated to be invested for intermediate term periods, and the return expectations are slightly higher than Tier 1. Liquidity and safety of principal remain important for Tier 2. And then Tier 3 assets are anticipated to be held for the longer term periods. They can assume more risk and volatility than Tiers 1 and Tier 2. And typical investments, again, are equities, long-term bonds, and potentially alternative assets. So again, Western does not allocate any assets to Tier 3 today. Section 4, liquidity. So this is an optional provision for the policy, but I do think it serves as an important function for establishing minimum liquidity targets or thresholds. And there's a variety of metrics that can be used to determine those minimum liquidity targets. Most common are the quick ratio, current ratio, or the days cash on hand targets. And then some universities may define minimum liquidity based upon projected monthly expenditures. And that's currently the process employed today. So as you are aware, the internal cash flow forecast track the projected 30 and 60-day cash outflows. And USSE utilized those cash flow forecasts to help determine minimum liquidity targets today. But again, and it's really what we do, it's a combination of a current ratio as well as days cash on hand and that heavy reliance on the 30-60 day cash outflows. Section 5 identifies the individuals subject to the prudent investor standard. Section 6 outlines the permitted investments. Here you can see they include the Oregon Short-Term Fund, the Public University Fund, where the assets are invested today. It also includes any other investment pools managed by the Oregon State Treasury and made available to Western Oregon. And then finally, any mutual funds or exchange-traded funds managed by a third party. We've not included any individual security types, so different types of fixed income assets or say CDs, et cetera. Really the pooled structure, I think, is a good fit for Western Asset given the amount of assets under management. But certainly something that could be added to this section into the future. Section 7 is for any investment restrictions. I've not included any here, but certainly if any come to mind, could be included in this section. The one thing to keep in mind when you invest via investment pools, where typically that fund manager owns the investment policy and not Western. So it's the due diligence process that comes into play to ensure that that fund manager and their strategy and their process aligns with the university's policy. But when that comes into play and you have specific investment restrictions, just keep in mind that compliance to those investment restrictions needs to be monitored. And it can be challenging. So an investment manager at some point in the future might incorporate in a single security or a particular sector on the investment restriction list that then creates a policy violation. So just keep that in mind if investment restrictions are identified here. Section 8, diversification. So this includes a statement to limit the maximum single security position to 3%. With the exception of U.S. Treasury bonds or any other U.S. government agency securities. And the reason for doing this is to help limit potential volatility of investment returns. So you might be interested in a fund manager who has a very concentrated portfolio, let's say of 20 securities, and that would exclude them from opportunity because they would certainly, if only 20 securities, they would allocate more than 3% to each individual security. So, and those funds, there's nothing wrong with those types of concentrated portfolio managers, but they can certainly bring additional risk and volatility when we're talking about university operating assets. It's not typically the type of volatility or risk that you want to assume with operating assets. And then section 9 through 11, this is just typical boilerplate language for the custody of assets, reporting requirements, and the policy review cadence. So this concludes my remarks and happy to open to questions.
Thank you, Penny. So do we have an open question here as to, again, the timeline for these investments? And, you know, do we need to specify that in this policy? And if so, I think maybe we could scroll back to toward the top. Yeah, okay, so do we need to specify the liquidity risk in this policy? And if so, I would want PB to weigh in on this.
And I would say if you would like to, if the committee and the board would like to include Section 4, the liquidity provision. So it's optional, but if you would like to include this liquidity position provision that would identify that threshold, it's not required, but certainly something that I think is appropriate to assess and determine, then yes, identification of how you would want to determine that liquidity threshold is important.
So if I can make a quick comment. So my understanding is we are looking at our cash, like our operating cash in this instance. So we bank with the treasury, and then we are trying to do a sweep, meaning that we have our operating cash, and then any excess cash that we are not going to immediately use, we are going to put that cash into some kind of investment. So there's going to be a sweep between when we need a cash flow and when we need to put the cash flow into some kind of investment to make some returns on them. Penny, am I describing it right?
Yes, you are correct.
Okay, so it's not like we are designating a portion of our cash into investment. So we are still talking about our operating cash account, and we are stripping the cash and investment to make sure that our cash do not sit idle, but we can make some returns on the excess cash. So to that extent, I'm thinking the cash flow projection that we have been doing, and I don't know if that should become part of the policy, because it's part of our operation where we do the cash flow projection and send it into the USSC. So, Penny, I don't know if that should become part of a board policy, or we can reference that as our threshold for determining whether, because there could be days when, because we are going to the dry season, meaning between May, June, we are not going to enroll students that much to get additional money. So those seasons, we are going to get low on cash. Then when fall kicks in, we are likely going to get more cash. So, so I'm thinking maybe we can leave it with the cash projection becoming the basis for how we do the sweeping, what we keep in liquid cash and what we put in the investment. And the investment is the state pool, right? It's not like we are going away from the state pool to do another investment, or are we going to go away from the state pool to do further investments?
Today, it's definitely with the state pool for cash, and then the public university fund, yes, for the intermediate term investments. No recommendations today to move away from the state, certainly meeting the objectives there. So yeah, no recommendation, but certainly as the university had additional excess assets, there's always an opportunity to look outside of the state as well. Western Oregon is in a unique position as a now independent entity that they can interact still with the state treasurer as well as with independent banks and investment managers.
Okay. So, so currently there is no recommendation to move away from the state pool. And based on everything we are observing and based on the current fiscal situation, I'm thinking that is a more conservative approach for us to keep with the state pool so that we can do the sweeping of cash into state pool. And then if we need more liquid, then we can sweep away from the state pool into cash to use the cash. So we will do that to a point. Maybe that can become part of our sustainability plan, where we build up cash reserve to a certain threshold, then we can stagger the cash. So we can say that maybe the next 2 million, we are going to move it into some kind of investment management. But from what I'm observing, I don't think we are there yet. And we haven't done the analysis to set a threshold where we can move away from the state pool. And the state pool essentially is cash, is so liquid. Penny, am I saying it right? The state pool is more liquid than an investment manager, some kind of portfolio investment. So for now, I think we can keep it as at using the cash projection and our call between the controller, myself, looking at the operation. If we are going to do a big refund and we need more money in cash than in the pool, then we can send message to USSE to let them know the cash need. So I would rather we run it that way for now until we establish a threshold where the cash flow meets, and then any excess cash flow can be moved away from the pool and from the liquid to look into other investments. So for now, I'm thinking it should be an internal dynamic between the controller, the associate controller, myself, sending messaging to USSE regarding our cash needs, and also doing the cash flow projections.
That makes sense. Would there be policy language stating that in here under the liquidity section?
I don't see no, I don't see anything. I think it's okay as written, but I was referring to the need for making a cash threshold or the criteria for determining liquidity as part of the policy.
So in other words, KB, you were commenting on the minimum liquidity balance conversation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It just, so you would just appreciate to strike that part out. Is that what you're?
Yeah, for now, unless the board wants to maintain this, or we can come back to this at a future date when we build more cash reserve in excess of what we want to keep in the state pool and what we want to keep in our operating cash. As it is now, the cash we have, I'm not seeing us moving away from the state pool and to another investment vehicle. I'm not seeing that. So at a later time, maybe once we build enough cash and we have excess like we did with the quasi endowment, if we have the next 3 million to invest in something, that is when I will look into the threshold. But for now, everything in there, I'm thinking is within the threshold as we are considering as part of operating cash.
So maybe the language just becomes a minimum liquidity balance may be determined
Yes.
instead of will be determined. Other comments or questions from trustees? I think that what we have here is a policy with the one change that we could recommend to the board for approval. If we could have a motion to that effect, that would be wonderful.
Motion to recommend to the board.
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Aye.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Aye.
and Chair Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Woo. Now I'm on investment policy overload. I don't know about the rest of you, but Penny, I don't know how you do this every day for a living.
Um, It's, I just live and breathe the investment world.
No, it's important. It's important, and you do a great job of explaining, and we appreciate all your work and KB's behind the scenes work with you on these policies. I think that'll be really good for the university. So I thank you. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Penny.
All right, so we are now ready to switch gears and move into recommendations from the Tuition and Fees Advisory Committee. And hopefully we have some representatives of that committee with us today, or still on the line, or I know Kemery does a lot of the work with that committee, and so we'd like to walk through that report and then hopefully have another action item to recommend this new fee schedule to the board.
All right. Thank you, Chair Evans. And we do have one of our student committee members on the line. So I think Evan is going to switch over and make sure that she's able to speak to you all. But while she's getting that transition, I'll kind of give a quick intro into tuition and fees. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong link and I'm scrolling fast on all of you. So, tuition fee proposal that's going into effect for next academic year. And we've got several different components, but since our student has been waiting, I'm going to kind of turn the gears to her first to speak about the Tuition Fee Advisory Committee. So we call this TFAC. It's another one of our acronyms that we just love. They are an official mandate. House Bill 4141 requires that we have a Tuition Fee Advisory Committee. But a fun fact about WOU is that we've kind of had an unofficial Tuition Fee Advisory Committee even before it was required of us. So it's just a good way for us to get student input on specifically they're recommending to the president and you all what the resident undergraduate tuition rate for next year should be. Because of the way that our WOU tuition rates, WOU is the WUE, that's 150% of resident undergrad. So even though that's not technically their charge, because they're recommending what resident undergrad is, it has direct impact on that too. And when you look at our undergraduate students, we have very few non-resident students. So this committee is really kind of making a big recommendation for the bulk of our undergraduate students for next year. And they're also tasked with recommending the changes for mandatory fees. So there is 8 people minimum on the committee. There are 4 students and then 2 faculty and 2 staff. This started back at the beginning of winter term. And so Mike Green was here with us at the beginning and then KB came in right at the end. But next year, I think you all might be hearing more from him than me about the work of Tuition Fee Advisory Committee. But with that is Alyssa with us. And Alyssa, would you mind speaking a little bit about the process and what we walked through, and ultimately the recommendation for resident undergrad?
Yeah, it was a great process. It was a great opportunity in general. I think especially as an accounting student. I know it's been a little bit since I've met with you guys and I've been kind of busy, so my memory might be a little hazy. But I know, looking here, I know we were near the 5% to get to a level that was kind of still trying to keep in mind of the students' money, but also trying to get to a point where we're operating level. I feel like the only recommendation that I would have to the whole process in general is trying to find more of a more input of students. I know we did have, I think, 4 students. I kind of seem to be the majority of one participating, which I understand. It's hard. But my biggest recommendation is maybe trying to reach out to the I think it's Business and Economics Division and trying to get some outside of class opportunity. I think the only reason I knew about it is because I knew someone in the business office tell me about it. But I didn't know about this opportunity, and I only did because of them. So I just think it would be better to try to get more people included. I don't know how, except the business and economics way, but yeah.
And Alyssa, what year are you in school?
This is currently my last year. I've been here for 4 years. I've been rolling pretty heavy all summer terms and everything since I landed here. So I'm happy to, get done. But
Oh, congratulations and thank you for taking the time to be engaged in this process when it sounds like it won't directly impact you because the summer rates will be the same, right?
yes.
But you have that perspective of your fellow students, and we do appreciate the engagement and the feedback on how we might get more input. And then I believe there was a survey that was done, and hopefully do you know if there were any ways to improve the participation in the survey?
Um, I know the survey is nice. I know as me personally, like there's a huge diverse group Western Oregon. When I was a student, I honestly never saw the surveys. So I don't know how we could market that better. Like I said, you know, I feel like the most um in front of your face for students would be their professors or something, but I don't know how you could go about that, getting professors to talk about it, possibly. Um, but I just think there's such a diverse group, so of different, because I wasn't a very active student, unfortunately. I do wish I could change that. I can't go back in time. And I think just a lot of different opinions would really benefit.
Mm, thank you. Yeah. It seems like the modeling that was done was really helpful to see the actual out-of-pocket impact to different types of students. Did you find that process valuable and helpful to the committee?
Yeah, honestly, that really helps because, being told a lot of words to your face that you're, especially as a student, new to. It was really helpful for me to just dilly-dally in the module and really look at the numbers.
And this increase, this may not be a question for Alyssa, but those who know with the higher ed commission, do we need to have approval of the commission on increases over 5% or over a certain threshold?
If I may, Chair Evans, I'll give a little more background information. So yes, if we were going above 5% total for the resident undergraduate based on 15 credits, so that includes all of their mandatory fees and their tuition rate, we would need HEC approval, but we're not going above 5%. We're right at the 5% when you add in the fee increases, so we don't need their special approval.
Okay. And had we gone over the 5%, would there be a different role for the students to play in that approval process?
I believe so. I'll tell you what I know, but we have yet to go above 5%. So I haven't experienced it firsthand. But I believe that if we were going to go above 5%, in addition to, our regular board approval on our tuition rates, we would also need to go to HEC for approval. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but I do think that having your students speak to the process and be in favor of the proposed increase would be a major influence on HEC's decision on whether or not that was approved, among many other factors too.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Alyssa. You are welcome to stay on through further discussion. There may be more questions for you about with your input. We really appreciate that. And we'll have Kemery walk us through the outcomes and recommendations of the committee then.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
If I may too give a shout out, Alyssa's actually being hired as in our business office. So we're really excited to have her too. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
all right. So I'll kind of walk you through the different pieces. There's a lot of different data here too. this tuition fee advisory committee, they kind of meet over the course of winter term, and they're looking a lot at this underlying data too. We kind of throw them right into the deep end and try and get them as much up to speed on our university finances as possible. We'll kind of speak about with that with the student survey too. It's a hard task to, you know, charge these students with making a recommendation that is going to cost them more while also, you know, looking at the health of the university finances and trying to balance that between, you know, the university's finances as well as the needs of the student. And so I do not want to not acknowledge that it is a very difficult task, and university finances are particularly complicated in my opinion when you get into the funds and everything. So they do a really great job. So our proposals to you that are all outlined in the tuition fee book I'll kind of walk through a high overview, and then I'll show you some of the underlying support of why these proposals are what they are. We're proposing just under 5%, so a 4.76% increase to resident tuition for undergrad. Why the weird percentage is that we really like to keep our tuition dollars whole. We don't like doing cents just because cents are a nuisance. So we've been keeping it the whole dollars. That's the closest to 5% that we could get while keeping the whole dollar. You'll note that it's a lower percentage increase for the non-resident undergraduate. We're proposing a 1.64%. Again, this is a very small population of our students. We have less than 100 students in this category. But the reason for that would be that we were looking at our ratio of non-resident undergraduate tuition to resident undergraduate tuition, and we were getting a little bit out of line compared to our peers, looking specific at the other public universities, because when you apply a similar percentage, which has kind of been our practice, if you're doing 5% on, you know, a lower tuition basis, and you're doing the same 5% to a higher tuition basis, it kind of gets further and further spread apart. So that's why we were proposing a slightly lower rate, to kind of try and make that a little bit more back in line as far as the ratio. Graduate, we are proposing a just under 5% as well, which is a $24 per credit increase to bring that up to 507. Graduate students, we don't have different tuition rates based on residency. They all just pay the same rate. A lot of our graduate students are Oregonian residents. We do have our special graduate tuition rate now for our cohort of occupational therapy. So they are a cohort model, so they don't pay a per credit rate, they pay a per term rate. And we're proposing a just under 5% increase to that as well. From 87.25 to 91.60. One special note is that most of these, all but the occupational therapy change will be going into effect for this upcoming summer term, so summer 2025. But because of occupational therapy and it being the first cohort and the way that we had to approve their tuition rates, if you all recall, you approved occupational therapy 2 years ago. Their summer 2025 will actually remain at that 87.25 rate is what we are proposing, and not go up to the higher rate until fall term. So kind of a one-off there. As far as fees, we're proposing a 4.57% increase in health service fee, $8 per term increase. They have a slightly reduced rate for completely online or Salem, this similar model to the incidental fee. The thought there is that they can still access the services entirely by paying that reduced fee. So if they came into, you know, our Monmouth facility, they could still access their full services. But the thought is that a lot of times our online students or Salem students aren't coming into the facilities. And so that's why the reduced rate is it's kind of a quasi for usage. We're also proposing a $13 increase to the building fee. No increases to our student health building or student rec, and then no increase to the online credit fee. And then last but not least, I'm going to say we're proposing, but the incidental fee process is a little bit unique, that it is entirely run by students, and there would be only a few exceptions where our board couldn't kind of accept the rate that they're proposing, and I don't believe any of those exceptions were met this year. But they also decided on just under a 5% fee. And again, they have that two-tier fee. So for students that have any courses on our Monmouth campus, they're paying a higher rate of $435, and then for completely online, completely offsite, they're paying $220.
Amory, if I can, I just want to make sure the trustees understand that the IFC fee is exempt from that 5% approval threshold. So that's not incorporated into that conversation for the new trustee members.
Thank you.
No problem.
And then summer rates are also included in this. The summer tuition rates, other than occupational therapy, are included at the same rate. And the building fees have a slightly different schedule. It's kind of been consistent with past. So building fees are slightly less. And then the summer incidental fee is actually a 10% increase. To Evan's point, they're not bound by that 5% increase. And they were looking at summer and it hadn't been increased in quite some time. So that's why they wanted to go with the higher rate, 10%. Room and board rates are also included, and the housing rates are by individual room type and residence hall. So it wasn't an across the board. They kind of were looking at demand. And so some of the more in demand units, they applied a 5% increase. Some of the lesser demand, they applied a 3%. And then dining rates reflected 2.5% increase. To also give you kind of some bulk behind a lot of these recommendations is a lot of them have their own committees besides TFAC. So the Student Health and Counseling Center has what they call the SHAC, the Student Health Advisory Committee. And so they are making a recommendation to TFAC for the health service fee. And then the Room and Board has what they call HDAC, which is the Housing and Dining Advisory Committee. So both of those committees have students on them that are reviewing these and working closely with the people in charge of those areas to make their recommendation as well. Other information here to kind of show you some charts. Much of this is shared with TFAC. Like I said, we do our very best to get them as up to speed as possible on all of our university finances. And so a lot of this is going into their decision making too. Comparing to where we are at with all the other Oregon public universities, this is based on 15 credits per term. But for quite some time, we've been on the more affordable end, is how I'll phrase that. Eastern typically is a lower tuition rate than us, and everyone else is normally typically slightly higher. We're pretty close to PSU right above us. The question typically comes up what other universities are doing for the tuition increases. Some of them have already gone out and gone public ahead of us, but for the most part, each of the public universities are looking at anywhere between 4% and 5% increases this year. So we're all kind of proposing a similar range rate increase for next year. This graph also shows that ratio that I was talking about as far as our non-resident undergraduate tuition rate proposal. You can see that our ratio was kind of on the high end of the 3.19, and that if we continue or go with the proposed rate of 680 per credit, that'd bring our ratio down to 3.09. So still likely higher depending on what they all do with their tuition rates, but more in line, and why. We also looked up different occupational therapy doctorate programs, or different occupational therapy programs. Some schools have these as a master's, some of them as a doctorate. So I noted the difference. But comparing the different tuition out there, with the exception of the Washington State schools, you'll note that we are in line with a lot of the, and by in line, I mean actually more affordable than a lot of the other programs. And so even with the 5% increase, our cost would be $36,640, which is still less than all of those that we are currently less than. Pre any tuition increases they might also entertain. So that kind of helped feed into that decision. That was made in collaboration with the provost as well. Looking at our building fee, we're proposing a slight increase here of $13 per credit. It is staggered. It's a $2 per increase per credit up until you get to 12 credits, then it plateaus. We haven't increased this building fee since before, when we were all a system and we all had the same structure. And this helps fund debt service with past construction. A lot of our debt service payments were modeled on when we had more students. A lot of them are modeled on a 5,000 head count. We are now closer to a 3,000 head count. And so that's kind of prompting this need for an increase, is to keep us sustainable. This could also potentially, if there were a point that there were sufficient revenues, it could be used for other construction needs. That's not the driving force behind the request for the increase. The driving force really is to be able to pay our debt service that's currently out there that was based on a higher enrollment levels. And then some other information that TFAC was using when they are making this. So along with the proposed, typically one of our first meetings, we're talking about, okay, here's all of our university finances. Let's talk about increases. And we kind of decide what window we're even going to explore. And typically that window kind of sets itself. 0% being the low end, we're likely not in a position to reduce tuition, and 5% being the high end with that HEC level of approval needed if you go beyond that. So then we are looking at, the whole dollars in between those and kind of looking at what each of that would do for the university finances. To Gail's earlier comment, or excuse me, Chair Evans' earlier comment, we do create a model for them that's looking at the general fund. This perhaps looks similar to some of the models that we use in budget because they are very similar. We are showing them a lot of our tools that we use for creating the budget. But basically it's able to be changed live. We're having them plug in the different enrollment assumptions that they perhaps think also now that we have an associate provost for enrollment. She is greatly helping inform our enrollment assumptions. And so she had provided us with some preliminary guidance of what to use there. And then plugging in the different tuition rates and looking at what that does for our bottom line. We incorporated some expense assumptions for them as well, but kind of being able to play with what that fund balance is, and then also keeping in mind what our board policy is. So that guides a lot of our students in the committees kind of decision making here. And then on the flip side, that same model, it's got two tabs. The second tab is looking at the impact to the student and seeing what their out-of-pocket change will be depending on what happens with the fees, as well as talking about the different financial aid components for next year and that net impact, because a lot of years, although tuition has been increasing, there's been other aid factors increasing as well to hopefully offset that. Then we talked to them about enrollment, because how can you have a conversation with tuition without talking about enrollment? So we showed them some historical data here showing that we peaked for undergraduate in that 2011-12 year and how we've kind of been declining with some slight steadying and ever so slight increase the one fall. We also show them the revenues, just showing how, closely tied we are to our revenues are to our enrollment, as well as our expenses. And we have lots of discussions about our expenses and the different raising costs as far as personnel and how personnel heavy we are, how that really is driving our expenses, and how some of those personnel costs are outside of our control with our benefits being through PEB and the increases that we're facing there, how the university really can't do too much about it. And then we talk about our historical tuition rates as well. For the most part, looking back over it, we've been anywhere between 0 to 5%, showing our different increases on the graduate side and the different levels as well. There was one year that we were above 5%, 2017-18, but other than that, there's kind of the historical numbers. And then we talk about our historical mandatory fees. Incidental fee is one of the major fees that students pay, but again, they have their whole own committee, whole process, and we just incorporate that, but showing the different components of the fees over the years. And last thing I want to highlight to you all is the actual letter from TFAC. So they did support the 5% increase for tuition resident undergraduate tuition, as well as the 5% increase for the health service fee. And they did do the student survey, and I think Alyssa's comment is very well taken as an idea to get more student participation. I will certainly implement that next year to reach out. It is always a challenge to get student feedback each year. And so the survey, we always kind of take as a real positive. Getting 440 responses of 3,000-ish students, I think, is a pretty good turnout. IT does partner with us. They put it right on their portal so that they don't even have to go anywhere else. It's right on their portal, first thing that they see. But then it's always hard going to the point of these students are taking a survey without potentially having, the conversations and all the financial context. We included the questions here. We do our very best to explain it in the survey, but also if you're asking a student what they want to pay next year, I think it is understandable that a lot of them will choose the lowest rate. And so that's kind of where TFAC has to come in and try to balance that. These students are looking at their personal finances and that they potentially have, more of the university financial understanding because they've been a part of this committee and been walked through so many of these details, and trying to balance those two poles as we all do. And so this is our survey. By large, most students voted for the lower tuition increase that was presented. Although some did vote for higher percentage increases. So of the 444, just over 100 did acknowledge potentially in support of a higher tuition increase. Health service fee was also a higher support for yes, excuse me, that wasn't phrased right. Health service fee, the majority of our students voted not in support of a health service fee increase, but there was still a significant amount that were supportive of that. This is always one of my favorite questions on the surveys that we've included each year to rank your priorities for next year. I think it can be very telling. If the first question is, what do you want to pay for next year? And a lot of them will choose the lower rate presented. But then saying, okay, but of all these things, what's your priority? And affordability would be one of those options. And you can see that a lot of them do rank one as their top priority. Affordability, just over 200 students are saying affordability is their top priority for next year. So trying to balance that. We also put access to health services, access to academic support, availability of course offerings, on-campus experience, and maintaining quality academic programs. And then the other responses are all included for you here too. But all of that together is kind of the work and our proposals on the table. I'm happy to take any questions about anything.
Thank you. Any questions from our trustees? All right, hearing none. Good to know that the committee was as united as it could be in these recommendations. And so if we could have a motion to move this fee schedule forward to the board for full approval, I would appreciate that.
I move to approve the fee schedule forward for approval.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. Let's do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Trustee Perez,
Aye.
Trustee Schwartzler,
Aye.
Chair Evans.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. So we have an option here. We can go into our UBAC committee report or go ahead and just take a break. We're a little bit early, but we could reconvene at 3:25. We'll see. Wait, no. Yeah, 3:25. Unless there's a need to move anybody up on the agenda. Okay, Evan, let's just take a short recess then and reconvene at 3:25.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Yay.
We are ready to go when you are, Chair.
All right. Well, thank you for that brief recess. We have trustees Schwartzler and Perez in addition to myself back online. And so we're going to resume with our report and discussion items, starting with our University Budget and Advisory Committee tri-chairs. I don't know if all three of you are here, but welcome and thank you for your report. And let's hear from the committee.
And Chair Evans, I think it's going to be Zachary today representing UBAC.
All right, thank you.
And I need to move him into the panelists, so apologize, Zach. There you go. Sorry about that.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
I was
you.
from the sidelines, and of course, Melanie says sorry she couldn't be here. Everyone, she was on the line most of the day, and then actually had to go to another meeting. So we're here.
Thank you. Well, we're ready to hear from you on your report.
Okay. All right. First off, as always, thanks for having us. You back in the background doing some work. Camry, KB, thank you always for all the stuff that you do. We did just do our budget town hall meeting, and there's some stuff in UBAC world that's actually kind of more aligning with some of the town hall, thanks to KB's leadership recently. It's been awesome having KB around, so thank you. This report is pretty, I mean, you all, of course, can read what I'm about to say, but maybe I can elaborate on a little bit of the bullet points here. Some of the things we like to leave on this report because we feel like it's consistent. So centering around students, you'll see this report's pretty similar to hopefully others that you see, but of course, items considered by the committee are continuously reviewed under a model of centering students. So we like to, I mean, I just listened to the tail end of the tuition and fees committee where we're really centering all focus around student and student dollars and how we can serve them. So just a reminder, that one will probably stay on the list next time too. We have begun to have regular attendance from our student reps, which is great. And we actually have another student representative from ASWU who hopefully will join us. We've had like 2 almost seconds in the ASWU community, but they both have conflicts. So we're working on actually getting that second student member to be on committee, which would be wonderful. We appreciate that. Fostering accountability or accessibility. UBEC has sought to foster accessibility in the past, present, fostering. We're all across campus, really working hard. We have I think Staff Senate, I hope this week is going to have a couple more nomination requests out because we are lacking the representation that we really want. We've had some members leave, so we're looking to bring more on. We have an unclassified position and a classified position in the staff sector that will go out hopefully by the end of this week, and we get some folks for that. We're also consistently, like every meeting, we ask for someone to nominate themselves as our third tri-chair. Melanie and I are running around like crazy, especially with all the new stuff that's coming down UBAC, that we need a third. It's a good model. We'd appreciate if our committee would have a nomination. That's hopefully coming up soon. Yep, I think I covered those points with my rambling. Leadership soliciting. Yep, covered those. Sorry, everyone. I know this is a smaller group today, so I can be a little bit more flexible, I guess. And tons of time to prepare. Value and community. Again, items considered are consistently reviewed under a model of community, both WOU, local, state priorities, according with members and constituents. I guess kind of skipping over, UBAC again is the constituent body for all staff, faculty, unclassified, represented folks on campus, and we are valuing community because, of course, we like to talk to folks and make sure that they're in the know on what we know. Review. Camry, when did you send P9? Yesterday, today? I don't know, but we reviewed it today, Melanie and I. So we're trying to be the good stewards of this committee. Institutional sustainability. So we are following along with the university-wide budget timeline and are on schedule with this, receiving updates from TFAC and tuition committees. We kind of knew what was coming up with your last presentation, which is great, very transparent. Camry, KB, keep us up to date on that. We've been working with KB and Camry to understand the current budget, reviewing the following reports. So that P8 is the last one that we had when we created this document, but now we're on P9. And Melanie and I are reviewing those, and then Camry is typically presenting those at our UBAC committee meetings, which we have on Thursday. So I think we just put you on the agenda, Camry. If you saw that from Melanie, that was this morning. We're working on that. UBAC is still working out how we will serve an advisory capacity to the president. KB seems to be very aware of the utility the committee brings. And our plan kind of intentionally moving forward is UBAC to serve as the host body of our budget town hall meetings, which I don't think we have 100% yet on our next date, but we can, I think the rumor is May 7th if we get that going. And that will serve as a really good, I think, resource for the community, faculty, staff, everyone is welcome to come to those, ask questions, get updates on how the budget is working and moving forward. We will be relying on Camry and KB heavily to make sure that we are articulating correctly, and to also make sure that we're in some sort of capacity to screen questions and hopefully answer those questions as they come up, which we will hopefully work out. I think it's on the agenda actually because we made it today, is to get that all kind of hammered out Thursday. Which again, we're really proud of that. And KB, thank you again for that, because I think it's a really good thing for UBAC to be doing, is actually having not just emails and information going out across campus, but to actually have like a physical presence with other folks. And yeah, I just think we're looking forward to that, and we'll see how it goes. It could be, which knock on wood, a disaster, but I don't think it will be. We have some good people behind the scenes here, and the least we can do is serve as a mouthpiece for everybody. So we are actually looking forward to that. Student success, that goes back to WOU. We are working with them. Hopefully we get that second person on the committee. We did have a lot of questions come up, I think, after the student. That's probably what it was. Camry's nodding her head because Melanie and I both got emails. I think Camry got email from students after their town hall. So it's good that we have student representation. We could get that stuff out as soon as possible. They have access to our notes. We're moving to, I was just working with Luann today, who has given me now, Camry, KB, this is news. I'm now going to be on the website, so we'll be able to post things super fast on there. So I'll be able to put meeting notes and things on the UBAC website and update that moving forward, so it's a little bit quicker turnaround. I hope, not to say I'm not going to have to teach or something like that in the meantime or have meetings, but hopefully that'll be moving forward, so that transparency piece to the students will always be there. So if they do have a budget town hall, they can pull those things up on our website, anybody, anywhere. Course, transformational diversity. We're looking forward to ongoing conversations about planning for consistent budget town halls hosted by UBAC. We kind of covered this, reach more people campus and solicit more diverse information. That's kind of a key, is that diverse information point on this note. And then community strength, that falls back into the big plans for moving forward, is strengthening our community. I think the more transparent, and we've said it before in our committee meetings, is that, and I think we've said it here before, is that our goal is to be super transparent so that people do not speculate. And we want to be truthful, honest moving forward as things do constrict, which you all just saw the TFAC report. So there you go. Is there any questions that I can answer? I love when you all throw me questions too, by the way.
So the town hall was yesterday with the president and KB, and was that, am I
This was last week, the
last
big
week?
town hall. Yeah, and KB did a good job. I think KB, that might have been the first big speaking in front of folks. And hey, thank you, because that was my first big speaking in front of folks as well. KB.
How was the turnout, and what were the themes that came out of it?
So I think it was a really good presentation. And it kind of outlined the trajectory moving forward in kind of next year savings, the year after that savings, the year after that savings, and then our positive percentage line item that was at the bottom of our graph, our futures graph. And I think the turnout was fantastic. I mean, there was people standing up in the back. Seats were full. We had a lot of questions. I think maybe one or two were kind of difficult questions, but they needed to be asked, and I think it was a good resource, for folks to get out there and really ask their questions. I'm sure there were some online questions that we didn't get to, because I think there was about 5 or 6 questions that were actually asked from the audience right there, and we only had till 5. So it was good. It was a positive turnout, and it was great. The question is, can UBAC keep the momentum going? We hope so.
With more participation, I'm sure you can. So thank you for scrambling, both you and Melanie, for doing. I know you're involved in much more than just UBAC, but we do appreciate you scrambling and making sure there's more feedback loops to stakeholders because it's a recurring theme in any organization. Oh, we don't know what's going on. We don't know about this or we don't know about that. And then a lot of the organizers of information sharing feel like, my goodness, how many different ways do I need to communicate and invite people to be more engaged? But that's just the nature of, people being distracted or attentive at a certain point in time, and you either hit it just right or you don't, and it just depends. And so lots of feedback mechanisms and loops are going to be very helpful. But I think having Dr. Peters and KB present to really speak to the vision and the values that go into the budget and following the money, so to speak, I think that's really helpful. And I'm glad to hear there were a lot of people in attendance and a lot of questions, even if they're difficult. I'm glad they're being asked and answered. So that's good. We want it. We want to know. We know there's some desire for more and more transparency, especially when it comes to making difficult decisions around what programs might need to be modified or reduced or whatever. And those are always scary conversations. But if you have some guiding principles behind what you're doing and you share it, and people have an opportunity to weigh in and or even say call foul if they don't think it's being consistently followed, I think we're a healthier organization because of that. So thank you for what you're doing your part in helping with that.
Yeah, I think it's important. Melanie and I both, and I think the rest of the committee understand that we're in a unique position currently to help and assist the university in this change management kind of precipice that we're up against right now. And so, even though, yeah, we're moving quickly, we want to do a good job and make sure that whatever we're putting out there is really well thought out. And so, hopefully Thursday we'll get our nuts and bolts tightened up for this for these town halls moving forward.
Excellent. How about our other trustees, Schwartzler and Perez? Any questions or observations around this UBAC process? I know you're fairly new to the board and how all these different committees work together, but any questions for Zachary?
I don't have any questions. I appreciate the outreach and the town halls. Yeah, and so I hope we continue to have good turnout for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I echo what Katie said too as well. So appreciate it. And yeah, looking forward for more of your reports and keeping the students engaged and whatever we can do to help out with that too.
Thank you all.
Chair Evans, if I can just add a little more to the town halls. We're also working on an FAQ space on our website to answer some of the frequently asked questions that were sent to us or asked in the town hall or the student town hall to try to get a little more information. So we'll make sure that the campus community is aware of that FAQ once it's finalized. And then, of course, senior leadership is committed to also being as present as possible at those follow-up UBAC meetings, town halls, so that, we're taking notes, we're listening to feedback. If we can answer questions, we'll be there to answer questions. And we understand that this is an ongoing process. And I just want to echo what Zach said about the leadership coming from President Peters and VPFA KB. I think they did a wonderful job. I think they answered some really tough questions. And I think they kind of led from the front about, led with transparency and led with engaging, our students, staff, and faculty in tough conversations. So I just want to, give them a shout out and thank them for their leadership and their guidance to help our campus get through this challenging time.
Thank you for those comments. That's good to know. Good to know. Let's keep it up. All right. Well, no further questions for you, Zachary. You're, have a beautiful afternoon out there. Hopefully you can enjoy the rest of it.
I will. Thank you very much. On to pick up the kiddo and run at the park. So thanks for having us. You bet. We'll see you next time, everybody. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's move on to now our other acronym, UTAC, University Technology Advisory Committee report. And who do we have presenting today, Evan?
So I think all three of our tri-chairs for UTAC are on the call. Tom had asked for access to share his screen. So Tom, you do have the ability to share your screen. If Camry, now you have the ability to share your screen if you need to, and I'll just let you all take it.
Well, now I don't have the report in front of me. Can you share screen again?
Fair enough. Sorry,
Thank
Camry.
you. I didn't have it open in a separate document. Thanks. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and I'll just start out by giving a little bit of history just for this from this year for folks who might be new. So at the very beginning of the 24-25 academic year, the UTAC tri-chairs met in a retreat, and we took the university strategic plan and our knowledge of the key efforts regarding technology that were going on campus, like the big banner optimization implementation, and just other things we knew needed to be addressed. And we looked at the strategic plan and just aligned our activities for the year with the university strategic plan. So that's why you see the alignments at the top. The committee is really focused on these areas of institutional sustainability and transformational diversity in this current academic year. And we've been taking action throughout the year towards those areas of the strategic plan, and we've been reporting out on our activities in each of these reports. So this is our, maybe fourth report of the year, and we're getting towards the end of the academic year and trying to wrap up our activities for this year. So we did have a winter quarter retreat in February, and the first item on our agenda was the digital accessibility policy. And that was, you might remember from a previous report, there is a accessibility working group that's formed on campus, and it has stakeholders from across campus on that group. That group came to UTAC at the beginning of the academic year and asked UTAC to take on the work of creating a digital accessibility policy for the campus. So we're well along in that work. We've created a draft. The University Technology Committee has sort of looked at that draft and forwarded it on for us to take back to the working group. And now the working group in their next upcoming meeting is going to look at that accessibility policy and start to try to take the work that UTAC did and put that into the format that you see when you look at any policy at the university. We have a few questions that we still need to work through, so that is ongoing work, but we're getting very close to concluding that work. Any questions about the digital accessibility policy before we go on to the next item? Okay, great. Tom, did you want to take the next one?
I will start it, and I'll probably hand off to Amy.
Okay.
So during our retreat, I presented the University Computing Solutions Strategic Plan, and there's a lot of items in there about banner optimization, but and also the Equity Assessment Action Plan. But one of those items also was to implement the name policy. And then that rose, a lot of questions came up about, well, whatever happened to the name policy? Has that policy been set? And I think what we discovered was that there was some expectation that there would be a method for implementation that would be defined, and then another And on the other hand, we were waiting for the policy to be completed. And so we're kind of in a stalemate. And I'm hoping Amy can explain that a little bit more, what our next steps are for the name policy.
So yeah, actually I've been, had some email communications with Evan and Dominique. And so we've got some updates to the committee, and some more information coming out to get that group working, on the implementation plan. So that is moving forward.
So we have work going on with digital accessibility policy and now the name policy as well. So a lot of policy stuff going on, which is unusual for UTAC. So thank you, Amy. I'll take the next one, the Aleutian experience. So we actually had Gabe Williams from my team come in and talk about Aleutian experience and Wolf Web and the kind of the transition that's happening now. So there's a tool in our portal called Wolf Web that's really a link into Banner 8 self-service that provides some functions for students and staff and some business functions directly into Banner. And that is transitioning now to Banner 9 self-service. And one of those areas, I think it's noted in here, I forget exactly what it's called, but it's the ability to see your personal information that's in Banner. And it's in a much nicer format when you use Banner 9 self-service. So that transition is beginning to happen. So I think one of the topics that Gabe spoke about as far as Aleutian experiences, once we move to Banner 9 self-service, then we'll transition from the portal and the kind of bulletized list of items to the new Aleutian experience blocks, the boxes that will have information on them, as well as you can drill into them. And that's kind of the new portal. So we had a presentation on that from Gabe. And then following that, we discussed the whole Banner optimization project, which includes self-service 9, but also a lot of the assessments of all of the different areas of Banner. And I do have a slide I can share about that, just because it's hard for me to explain it all verbally. Okay. So can you see, so I'm showing the phase 1 timeline. This is the timeline of what we're doing for Banner optimization between December and June of this year. And you can see 3 main areas where we worked with financial aid. We had a workshop to determine, how well we're utilizing Banner. We found, where the gaps were. And then there was a follow-up assessment coming from our vendor, SIG, and I forget what that stands for, but we have the best vendor out there that Gabriel Williams had worked with before, and they really understand how Banner should be used. Anyway, we had our trip report that came back on February 28th, and now we're working through all of the items that were determined needed to be changed. And financial aid is doing a great job and has worked through a lot of their the items that were discovered. And then we had the student workshop that Amy's the key person who is involved there. And we worked on student Banner. And then we had a report coming back from student Banner. And now we have a list of the projects that need to be done in order to get to baseline banner for student. And then coming up in, was it May 13th through 16th, we'll have the workshop called the B2B or Back to Baseline workshop with HR. And HR is actually getting ahead of schedule. They're doing a lot of work to standardize what HR is doing, but this workshop will really give us a good outline of what's still left and put together the roadmap for completing the HR and payroll project. Come June through probably December, we'll work on finance and accounts receivable and then the portal and some new phases of what portal's gonna look like. Yeah, I think I just said all of this. Let me go back this way. Nope, okay. Lots of updates here. Oh, this is the one I wanted to show. Okay, this is a more visual representation of progress being made. So I know it's a tiny eye chart, but for banner student rapid implementation, we're at 29%. Financial aid rapid implementation, all the tasks are complete. And human resources rapid implementation, we're actually 37% complete, even before we had the engagement with SIG. And this bottom chart shows that this project is a $2 million project using the sustainability funds. We've spent almost $200,000 and we've asked for reimbursement on 106,000. So that's from the sustainability funds. Eventually, all of the money spent on this project will be reimbursed. We just have to go through the processes that are required for the grants. And here's kind of a chart of the blue is what we expect to spend, and then the green is what we've been reimbursed for, and the orange is what we spent so far. And you can see we're even ahead of schedule on some of the spending. So, okay, and I'm trying to be quick. Any questions about banner optimization from what I presented or what you kind of already know about banner optimization?
Your charts show a limited duration employee. Is that a consultant or what role is that?
So there's two different types of employees. We have the consultants that we are bringing in to really focus on, someone who's a real expert that helps us get something done. So they're in and out, where they're not really an employee, and there's very targeted hours. And the limited duration employee is someone we do hire. We say, and it's for the limit of the grants, and they may not even work on the project. They may be coming in to help Amy do her day-to-day work so that Amy is now available to do banner optimization work. And often the staff augmentation employee is a more of a level one, maybe even a recent former student that's is helping with the day-to-day work. And actually, we don't have one in Amy's area, but we have hired some, I think one in finance and one in HR. And that's in the budget. And I guess another thing is we are adjusting what we're spending the money on in our budget based on, if the staff augmentation person will work or not, or if we really need more expertise coming from a consultant. And so that, that dynamic is happening.
And can those costs be charged to the sustainability funds, or are those just part of our operating costs?
No, they're charged to the sustainability.
Okay.
So yeah, if someone is hired in a limited duration, they can charge. What I don't want to have happen is, you know, if an existing employee starts working on banner optimization and then they charge their time to the grants, they're really, it's really not additional resources. It's just like, oh, you're causing them their regular job to be, for them not to get their regular job done. Or you're basically saying this person will no longer be needed after banner optimization is completed. And I don't want to put people in that, you know, in that position where like, oh, you worked yourself out of a job and now what do you do? So it's definitely bringing in additional folks to then augment or do the work.
Gotcha. Okay.
Any other banner optimization questions?
No, just thank you. It seems like it's quite the project to take on.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's great that we have support from, you know, everyone. I haven't heard anybody say, well, you know, I'm really concerned about, you know, things changing. I think a lot of folks have been saying, hey, I'm looking forward to change, looking forward to being more efficient.
Yeah.
And so that's the goal.
Well, just the process of looking at workflows and, you know, procedures, just that in and of itself has such great value, whether you end up automating it or not, or using Banner for it or not. It just opens the window to efficiencies to be gained.
Yeah. And it's great to have the experts coming in and helping us with the business process analysis. And then we've had a couple of experts come in with helping with the project management. And so long we've been trying to do it ourselves in our spare time. And so having the funding to bring in the expert resources is helping a lot.
It looks like you have some great monitoring and reporting graphics going on there in your steering committee file. Ray, I know this might be near and dear to your heart. Do you have any questions or observations for Tom on this?
Not this time. I'm all about augmenting when you can augment, not put it on your own staff. So I'm full support of that. Use project managers in a lot of different projects, enterprise-wide projects all the time, and they're worth their weight in gold. Keeping your team focused and putting deadlines there, and also just communication out and all the other things that us IS people are not good at, which is, you know, communication. We're not good at that. We like to say we are, but you know, it's a struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a struggle. But you know, last time we met, you mentioned that you wanted to see some more statistics around this. So that's where we started putting together these graphs. So there's an ROI that's I didn't show that one, but it's only at 2% right now. But we'll get there. Right now we're doing the assessments, and then the actual, you know, the results won't be for another year or so.
Yeah, I imagine that will all kind of accelerate more and more as you get closer to the final stage. So it'll be exciting to watch that roll out. All right. Well, thank you for this update. And I think with that, we're ready then to move on to our next agenda item, and that's our finance and administration report.
Hey, KB, you're muted.
Wow. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I said I have a preamble to talk about my observations since coming on board. Today is my 33rd day. I've been here 33 working days. So I have met with people trying to understand the strategic plan. I have thrown out some ideas. And so far, people have been very receptive. People have been very, very cooperative, very receptive. The welcoming has been very, very fulfilling. And then I'm also looking for opportunities, how we can transform the fiscal space. And I have mentioned a few things over here that I'm looking forward to work with people, collaborate with my colleagues to make sure that we can implement to transform the fiscal space. There are a lot of initiatives ongoing, and then there's the strategic plan. So going forward, the plan is to look at teams within finance and admin so that the initiatives could be grouped in a way that we can map to support the strategic plan. So that is what I have attempted to do with this particular report. And I know going forward, I will fine tune all the committee because within FNA, within finance and admin, I know we have TFAC, we have the UBAC, we have UTAC, then we also have banner optimization ongoing and pockets of initiatives here and there. So how to coordinate and harmonize those initiatives to have a unified planning process that will go a long way to make sure that they are all coming together to fulfill particular objectives and goals within the strategic plan. So that is something I'm going out to do. And then I've mentioned the budget planning, having a framework to look at planning. I know we have planning activities ongoing, but to sharpen the planning activity to make sure that it's more focused regarding what we are trying to do. We all know about processes and procedures. We know about internal controls, risk management, compliance. All those are things that are on the radar for me to zoom in to make sure that if we are refining processes, we are also making sure we have the right controls in place. We are also making sure the controls are going to enable us to achieve the right compliance. And then we are also going to take an enterprise view of risk so that we can be intentional about how we introduce risk discussion into what we do. I know there are pockets of risk assessment, risk management going on, but I'm talking about harmonizing all those pockets of discussions ongoing so that we can be focused and more intentional about enterprise risk management. We know we need data to also make decisions. So we are also looking into how we can bring more data into the decision making, like analyzing the data, because at times there's raw data. The question becomes, what does the data say? So taking an approach where we are also going to analyze some of those data fiscally, I'm talking about the financial space, so that we will be able to feed people with information. And I'm talking about looking over divisional programs to look at. So typically, fiscally, I'm talking about fiscal. I know the programs have their own program outcomes that they also have to achieve. But on the flip side, if you look at the business of programs, then the question becomes, what are the associated revenue generation streams and what are the outlay for expenses? So we are trying to do some of those so that when the provost is making decisions on program, then there will be data at least on P&L to support that. We are also looking into athletics program. And so far, we are working with them to look at the program, how much it's costing us, what are the pool for credit hours bringing in, the athletics programs are bringing in, what are the associated revenue generation stream. We are looking at all that so that when athletics, they are making decisions, then at least they have that data to support the decision making. So UBAC, we are working with UBAC, and town hall is going to be part of our budget planning process. So within the budget planning process, we are looking at a budget schedule. And the budget schedule is going to have timelines regarding when we do revenue forecast, when we do expenditure forecast, when we come to the board, when we do engagement, constituent engagements, when we take feedback from budget managers, all that, when we do workshop, when we train. So we are going to have like an annual cycle of the budget planning process so that we will publish it for people to know the schedule so that we can work the schedule throughout the year. And within the schedule is when we are going to embed the communication, the engagement, the feedback, what others will call transparency, where we are going to open up so that they become part of the process, so that when we go through the cycle, we are going to take them along all the way until we have a budget for the board to approve. So all those are things I'm working on together with Camry and my team to make sure that we have those also in place. So talking about the strategic plan for the university, I'm trying to group our activities. So I'm looking for, because I know we have a lot of activities going on. So for example, budget planning. We are doing planning. So we are working on things that can feed or that we can map as a budget planning process. So we are looking at the reporting that Camry does for budget managers. So on a monthly basis, oh my goodness, 1 second. I'm so sorry. I pulled my laptop to sit on my conference chair to have the freedom to do this meeting. And then I receive a pop-up that I should put in my charger. I'm sorry. So I'm good. So Camry does a monthly budget reporting for our budget managers. And the intent is for budget monitoring. So whenever she does the report, people are able to look at their spend levels. We have percentage spent compared to your budget. So all those feed into budget monitoring, which is going to be part of the planning process that, and we are also talking about the management reporting we do to the board. So those management reports are going to feed into it. So all those are part of it. So we are going to look at engagement. We are going to look at budget request process. We are going to look at forecasting. We are going to build a template for budget managers to accumulate our fixed cost, what we have obligated the university. We know we have subscriptions, we have licenses, we have memberships, we have utility costs, we have contracts. So the question is, what are the commitments out there? What cost do we have discretion over, and what costs are so discretionary or not discretionary? So all those are going to feed into the budget process so that when we are doing forecasting, we know our fixed cost, we know what we have discretion over. Then if we are talking about deficit, then we know the deficit we are talking about. So all those are ongoing. So I'm trying to make sure that going forward, we are going to find a way to map all those activities into teams. And one of the teams likely is going to be budget planning. Then when you look at sustainability, I'm looking at short term, I'm looking at long term, and potentially in between is going to be the medium term. So when we get to a point where we have sufficient money to do investment, I'm talking about operational funds for investment, that is where the medium term will come in. But for now, I'm looking at long-term sustainability, then I'm looking at short-term solvency. Short-term, so the long term is where we are having the sustainability plan, the 5-year plan. So we are going to map ourselves into the next 5 years. Then the question becomes, looking at year 1 into year 2, what is the course correction? What do we need to fix to make sure that we are going to be sustainable going into the second year? then into the third year, into the fourth year, into the fifth year. So it's going to be a map that is going to guide us as we are doing our budgeting, then we can course correct. So that will be the long term. Then the short term is going to be the solvency. So the question is, do we have sufficient cash resources to operate? That is where the cash projection also comes in. So then we are looking at the monthly, the next month, the quarterly, the next 6 months, all the way until the year end. So we are looking at how on month-to-month basis, we are able to make sure we have sufficient cash flow. And then we are also looking at our expenditure going out. How do we manage when we cut check? How do we manage our accounts payables and all that? So all those are going to come together to contribute to what we are going to look at as short-term solvency. And then I know there are dashboards that come with all of those. So the long-term sustainability, when you look over the strategic plan, we have some dashboards we are looking at. So NACUBO has certain measures. There are certain higher ed standardized ratios that we are also looking at. The short-term sustainability, we all know the liquidity ratios. We have the current ratio, the cash ratio. All those we are going to build as part of the FNA strategic plan. I know there's a strategic plan that I'm working with the direct reports to streamline, to make sure that we are beefing up, and then we'll bring it back to the committee to share with all of you. I've already mentioned the return on investment that is going to support the data analysis to make sure we provide sufficient information for people to make decisions. And I mentioned the ones we've done with academic affairs and the one we are doing also with the sports programs. Banner optimization, it should fit in somewhere, and I know it's part of what we are trying to do. So under sustainability, if we can streamline processes and achieve optimization, it's going to enhance productivity, it's going to reduce inefficiencies, it's going to make things work properly, which is going to go a long way to make sure that we are fiscally sound. So I'm going to throw that also under the sustainability. And then I receive communication from Tom regarding the outcomes so far. So far, like financial aid, after some processes were optimized, we can see the savings they are making now within the financial aid space. So this is going to continue, and I know Tom and his team, they have a way to track the outcomes. Then eventually we are going to be able to assess all those outcomes to see how we are able to enhance our fiscal space also. As part of the strategic plan, there's mention of shared service as an activity to help us to be sustainable. So I'm looking at my team, what else can we do to make sure that we are having pockets of shared service that will enhance efficiency while at the same time reducing our cost. And I know our public safety people, they are able to do that through a partnership with the Paul County. And this came from Rebecca regarding what they are doing to make sure that is also achieved. Can you keep going on? Okay, so we have reorganization. So as part of the budget process or the planning process, we're going to provide the opportunity for budget managers to take a second look of their functions. So you can have the same amount of budget allocation, but the question becomes, how can you repurpose, reimagine your own functions to make sure that you can achieve optimization and efficiency? Do you have to continue doing what you are doing as you are doing it, or you can optimize yourself even without more money, using the available resources to do something different? So it's going to be part of the discussion. We have to be intentional. So if people are intentional, they take a second look of their function, I think they will be able to see advantages and opportunities regarding realigning, reimagining, repurposing, reorganization. And within FNA, we did one with our CPC, which is the construction planning team, the capital planning and construction team. We lost a director in the space. As a result, we took a second look regarding how it should function going forward. And we're able to do a reorg, putting it under facilities, the 2 employees who were within the area, the program managers, project managers, we were able to reassign them within facilities. And then we're able to save some money on labor. And it's functioning okay. We are working with HEC. Rebecca is now in charge. I'm supporting. We have a capital accountant who is also supporting the effort. And the PM now, they have more leverage. They have more leverage. I mean, they are also available to support deferred maintenance and other things other than concentrating only on capital. So now we have more leverage to make sure that we are putting together, we are harmonizing our capital needs with our maintenance needs, so that whenever there's resources available, we are able to coordinate the resources to achieve the efficiency we need to achieve, instead of having capital working their way here to the left and then facilities working their way to the right. I think currently it's unified, and I think there's going to be a lot of efficiency in there. So when you look at the student success area, can you keep going? Oh, so utility and conservation, that is a big thing. One of our biggest fixed cost is our utility payments. So as part of making sure we are sustainable into the future, we are going to look into how we conserve on utility and energy. So sustainability, energy conservation is going to be intentional, because I keep saying that if you are not intentional about conserving on utility, utility at default is going to increase. So a default is going to increase unless you are intentional about holding the escalation or reducing it. And I know there's a lot of activities going on to try to reduce utility costs, but I think we are going to make it more robust going forward. So on the student success side, I know there may be a lot of areas to take credit for student success construction, but I think that is a big achievement. Looking at the CPC, meaning the capital planning and construction team and facilities, the president, all the advocacy that went into getting the money, the board. I think this is huge regarding the Student Success Center. And I know the president may have more to say about this because of the ribbon cutting coming up. But for the purposes of F&A reporting, is part of what we think is going to contribute to student success because of all the wraparound services that is going to be housed there. And then we are talking about, I know regarding the students also, for student success, we're able to establish a student account hold policy. So in the past, the threshold to hold a student, holding a student meaning that you don't drop the student if they owe money. So the threshold was a fraction. So it was difficult to do the calculation of for students to plan. But now we've been able to streamline that to a dollar amount. So now the dollar amount is out there. The student knows that I can't owe this much and still remain in my classes. So I think now it's going to feed into the students as they are planning about how they pay for their education, which I think is a good thing because it's bringing clarity into what they need to know in order to plan for their own education. So that is one thing we are also tracking. Can you keep going? Then we are also talking about IT innovation and renewal. So whatever we are doing in the IT space to make sure that it's promoting student success is something I'm going to work with Tom to also, because I know there's a lot of activities going on, but we are going to be intentional regarding how we are renewing student technology, classroom technology, to make sure that they are all harmonized to contribute to student success. It's something we are also going to work on. And then this is student internship, because for retention, if a student has an activity on campus, whether they are joining a committee, the student government, whether they have work on campus, whether they are engaged in some form of internship, we all know the research shows that we are able to retain them, and their progression rate also increases. So that is going to be intentional. I know there's a lot of effort ongoing, but then we are also looking out to make sure that at least within the business office, we just had an announcement that a student had been hired. So giving the opportunity to students to train them so that we can also hire them to make sure that we are supporting their success both in the classroom and also in the workspace is something we are also going to look into. Transformational diversity, I know the UTAC mentioned the accessibility. There's a digital accessibility policy under consideration, which is something we are going to be intentional about implementing going forward. And then professional development. I know our campus safety people, they do training on bias, they do training on de-escalation, they do training on sexual assault response and all that. All those will come together to contribute to making people more engaged and also learning about how they can defend themselves in those instances. Community strength, both I'm looking at engaging the campus community where the town hall comes in. And I'm also looking at having partnerships with our cities. So one thing I did when I came on board was to reach out to the city manager, the city of Monmouth manager. So I reached out to her. We held a discussion, and the plan was for us to have a standing meeting so that periodically we can meet to discuss things of mutual interest. How can we support the city? How do we expect the city to support us? So trying to make sure that we put our expectations on the table so that we can have a way of working together going forward. So that is something. And then I also know our UCS also working with the City of Independence to look at opportunities to explore how we can have like some kind of facility for startups within the city enclave. Our business office, we all know about the VITA program, the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, is supervised by WOU faculty, where community members meeting a certain income threshold, they come to the campus so that our students who can support them, prepare their taxes for them. So our business office was able to coordinate with them, provide some technical assistance in that instance. And then the last one I have here is the budget town hall. We had more than 300 attendees. So the attendance was very, very encouraging. The participation was good. Before then, we pushed out a form for people to submit a pre-town hall questions. I counted about 51 questions that came in. And then during the period, there were about 7 questions, but we answered about 2 of the I think we answered about 5 of the questions. So I put 2 of them in there, which I specifically asked the president on stage, meaning that 9 questions at least was answered on stage. And then there was a lot of interaction. A lot of people showed interest. After the meeting, a lot of people have sent feedback. And like I said, the feedback has been participation. So opening up for people to participate. So that is what we are going to do. So going forward, UBAC is going to lead the town hall. We're going to do all the technical work for UBAC. And then we are thinking if they are on stage and their colleagues have questions, it's not going to be staff against senior administration. So that is the intent. That is the main purpose why UBAC is going to own the town hall, because it's going to be a colleague asking their mouthpiece a question versus administration against staff, so that people will have the liberty to come to the meetings and talk to their colleagues. So essentially, that is the purpose why UBAC is going to own it. But we are going to be there, support technically, and also available to answer any questions. I think I will stop, and if there is any question, I will entertain it.
Well, thank you for laying out your report in this way. I think it's really valuable and hopefully won't be too time consuming for you to update going forward in the future.
Mm.
This is very exciting.
Hey,
Will your team be providing like ad hoc services to help departments calculate the ROI on various
Yes.
programs? And okay,
Yes. So typically we build a template, we send it out for them to populate. Then we do the calculation and then we meet with them again to go through it so that we can all be on the same page with them. So yes, it's a collaboration effort. So the cash flow statement is attached. You've already seen the management report. And then we also have something on capital. So because of time, do you want to go through the cash flow or the summary is there? And then the capital, Rebecca is available to do a quick presentation, a one-pager on the capital to provide a quick update on where we are on the projects. So I don't know if you want Nick to jump in on the cash flow. The summary is up there. We are looking at starting the year at 35 million and then predicting to end the year at 26 million. There's more to this, but this is a prediction. So at the end of the year, wherever we land, we will report back to the board.
okay.
Hey, KB, I wanted to,
Yes.
if we can go back to your report real quick, and I know
Mhm.
we're short on time, but I do want to call this out, especially for our new trustees, because I think it's an important thing that we're getting responsibility of, which is Polk County is handing over responsibility to Western Oregon University for the CERT teams. And, Trustee Schwartzler especially understands the importance of the role of CERT in our county and our community. And so I think it's a real opportunity for our university, not only to collaborate with community partners, which is part of our strategic plan, but really show what we can do to highlight and support the need for that kind of training, emergency management training, emergency preparedness training, showing up and being responsive and helpful to law enforcement for large events like the Independence Day Parade, other community events. And I'm really excited that Western's getting this opportunity and really think that Rebecca, her team, as well as KB, and the whole finance administration team will really shine, and it'll be a real highlight for the university that we're getting responsibility for that. So I just wanted to call that out and give his KB's team and Rebecca's team kudos for I'm assuming that was a volunteer, like we'll take it kind of deal. So I just want to thank you all for doing that.
Thank you. And then there is another achievement which I didn't mention because it came after the fact. Our accounting and business office was recognized by the DAS, the State Administrative Services, for being diligent on receivable reporting. So we are waiting on the certificate of recognition. Once it comes, I know the next reporting, I will share that with the board. But that is kudos to Shadron and all his team.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, yeah, I mentioned about the summary of the cash flow projection. So if the board is okay, we can move on to the capital
Yes.
capital presentation. So Rebecca, do you want to quickly go over the capital presentation?
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about capital planning and just kind of some of the exciting things that we have going on. As KB already mentioned, we did a bit of a reorg, and I'm always for a reorg if it gets more efficiency and better communication and all those things. And truth be told, there may be more reorg to come if we see that that's what's needed. The things that we're looking at now is trying to improve our processes, improve our communication, and all of those work towards getting a better product on the other end. A handoff of Student Success Center to the E&G side when the project is finished is important, because we now, with our E&G funds, have to sustain that for the life of that building. And so we're getting some things in place to make sure that those things go smoother than they have in the past, and always with the goal of building those things and completing those projects with sustainability in mind, long-term sustainability, and the success of the program, that it's housing, all those things, in order to not be a liability to the university on the E&G side. So looking at those things, we've got I highlighted the two big bond projects with the student success and the steam line, and kind of where they're at in their completion. They're just about done. You see there's $817,000 left for student success that we need to spend by March 26. And we're looking at a lot of the work to try to use that money is making sure that everything's surrounding there. So the building was built with, of course, ADA things in mind, to be in compliance with all those, and even be above and beyond, because this building was touted as that. It was proposed as that when it was put forth to HEC several years ago. And so we're looking at immediate areas right around that building now. If we can take some of that and expand it out a little bit and make sure those sidewalks are graded just exactly right. Make sure the access is dialed in as much as we can possibly get it dialed in. So those are the things that we're looking at. We've also got the 1% art is encumbered, so it's not included in that 817, but it won't be completed until that March 26 date. And that's kind of the drop dead date, is March 26 is when we have to have those funds used according to HEC. And so then the other one is the steam line. We have about 1.3 million left in that. We have the paving project, trying to get on schedule for this summer, because we live in Oregon, and so that's when you pave, and that's when you do concrete projects and all those things. And so we're trying to get that on tap. We will be about 24K over budget on that, so we'll dip into some of our CIR funds to cover that cost on that. And so I think you can go. Well, so the other thing that was right there that I didn't cover was we have 1.37 million left in our current CIR dollars. And then we just got funded for the next biennium, which is 5.15 million. And so with that, we have some projects that were already ongoing, whether it's to use up the current or to start into the next ones. But we'll definitely get the money spent. We don't have to worry about that. But the other thing that we're working on is to make sure how we decide to use CIR dollars that's given to us by HEC, is to come up with a rubric that basically matches how they grade proposals for the big bond projects. And so that way we can use that as a university to say, these are the things that are important to us. And so some things that are noted in that are sustainability, student success, especially for underserved students, looking at everything through the deferred maintenance lens. And so we're going to identify some of those things out of that same rubric, the scoring rubric that HEC uses, and make sure that we're looking at it through that same thing to be able to use these specific CIR dollars in the different smaller projects on our campus. And a lot of times it's going to be building envelope, of course. That's always going to be a big one, is getting those roofs on to keep everything dry. And then the other things we can absolutely, how do we tie it to the strategic plan? How do we tie it to student success, academic success? How do we tie all of the things that we're doing to that? And so here's some other things that are doing. Some of these are projected costs. Some of them are ongoing. These are things that we already have approval on. We're already moving forward with. Just some little final touch-ups in Salem. roofs. We've got quite a few roofs that we'll be doing this summer. Again, summer's when you do roofing projects here. Natural science chiller install, and then ADA sidewalk upgrades, and these are in addition to the ones around student success. These are ones that we have noted across campus, whether they have tree roots interfering with a sidewalk. And I know Jesse never wants to hear me say anything about taking down a tree, and we try our best not to do that. But in the interest of ADA, of course, we're always looking at those kind of things that may be an accessible issue for our folks on campus. And so we're looking at all those things. We want to make sure we get as much as possible as we possibly can on that. A new hazardous material shed that's not just a cinder block, about a 6x6 shed. It has no shower. It has no eye wash station. And so we've got to upgrade that to get our people safe that work in and out of that and to store our hazardous materials. And then lighting projects. Lighting projects are always going to be with the eye of sustainability. Oregon has the laws in place for that to where we're LED. And so we do the next best thing on that is to go out with our different vendors and get the best prices possible. And HVAC controllers, another thing that makes us more energy efficient is the more automated control we can have over our building systems, the more efficient that it is. And then drainage correction. Again, tree roots. If any of you have ever had those kind of issues at your home, we have it here just on a much larger scale. And so all of those things are fantastic things that we're doing. And I want to remind you, if you don't know about the Energy Trust of Oregon, and so many of these things we're able to then turn in the documentation to them, and we get back money, so it's more money to spend. And so roofs are big on that if they have insulation with them. The HVAC systems and controllers, they're actually doing an analysis right now on that 75K one, that we could possibly get almost all of that back. And so we do those things, we get the money back, and then we do more things. The lighting, all of those things are a lot of times applicable to that kind of system where we can get that money back. So those are the things that we're doing to try to just keep us on a good path towards efficiency and sustainability.
Well, thank you. And thank you for taking on the additional role of capital projects. And I like the synergies that you're finding there. I do have a question about the remodel of the first floor of the administration building. I just wonder, what's the long-term plan for that building? I understand it may not be seismically as strong as some of our other buildings. Is that still a concern? And should we be investing in a remodel if there are some seismic concerns about that building?
So there's not been anything decided to my knowledge. It's just one of those deferred maintenance things that's listed out there that says this needs to be considered to be done. It's got to be somewhere in a plan for somebody to think about, much like the cottage. The folks that are in the cottage are moving into, we've got to rename this building. It's old advising center. It was old student health. And so anyway, I know somebody's coming up with a new name for it because the cottage needs work. And so all of those things have to be considered. If it's looking at doing a seismic upgrade and all those things to administration building, then that maybe is something we apply for next year for some bond money to actually be able to do those kinds of things. I don't know. This will be tied to overall the strategic plan. What is the path forward? And Dr. Peters, I'm sure you have a lot more to say about that.
Well, I won't say a lot because I know there's not a lot of time, but for the trustees, the opening of the Student Success Center really created a lot of space that is available on this campus. That coupled with moving the bursar's office and the registrar's office to the Welcome Center. So there's no lack of space, and we now need to really plan what we're going to do with it. This building, I think, is like a 0 to 1% survival during an earthquake, so it'll just be decimated pretty quickly. So it's a good question. Do we invest in sort of remodeling to use the space at this point, or do we wait to seismically upgrade it? And the same with the cottage. What should the cottage be is a great question. It's in the center of campus in many ways. Should it be the president's office? Should it be a student focus center? Should those things be combined? So I think we're going to engage in some good planning on that with the finance and administration team and try to, there's nothing worse than moving people a bunch of times. And so our Office of DEI, for example, it was just Dominique above my office, and then she came into my suite, but then that expanded. So they went to where our lawyers used to be. But now it looks like if lawyers start to get the contracting flow again, they may need a little more space. So now she may move again. So we need to get this planned out a little better.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from our committee?
Yeah,
All right.
real quick,
Go ahead.
Rebecca, I'll talk to you offline, but maybe we can create a campus map with some of the bullet points of where these improvements are to really highlight them for a future trustee meeting and communication with our legislative partners and HEC partners around what we're doing with this money, because I love this list. And I think like a visual component would be super helpful to supplement what you're highlighting here.
Yeah,
So
I'd be happy to work on that with you, Evan. Just let
wonderful.
me know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well then, we've already had our budget dashboard update, so that moves us then to our committee charter review. I'll turn it over to you, Evan.
Yeah, so thank you. So we have I think with the time that we have, it might be wise just to give an overall update about this and encourage the board members between this meeting and our next FAC meeting to provide feedback on the Google Drive they're all shared on version of this. And then in May, we can approve it for the June board meeting. Does that sound all right, Chair?
Yes,
Okay.
that sounds like a good plan.
Wonderful, thank you. So as you heard in our conversation with Penny around the new board statements, historically, this is our committee charter, according to our bylaws, should be reviewed at least biannually, and our charter actually says annually. So just to make sure that we're consistent with what it says is consistent with what best practices are at the moment. And so this is a hygiene kind of exercise just to make sure that we're continually reviewing and updating our charter. So real quick, we have a mission statement here. And it might be a good opportunity for KB and the team to review that and make sure it's still consistent with the strategic plan, since we have a new strategic plan. So I'll just flag that for you all there. General responsibilities. As the FAC, you, under the guidance of the full board, you develop, recommend policies necessary to ensure the university resources are managed prudently, effective, and efficiently. Remember, you are the fiduciaries here. So this is consistent with that fiduciary responsibility. You want to make sure that we're developing and recommending for board adoption operational policies for operation and transactional authority that can be delegated to the president and VPFA. Using that as a guiding principle, your board statement on designation, the delegation of authority, section 1.6. So I'd encourage you to look at the delegation of authority as well. We did update that last year as part of the governance reform, but it's important to note that we might have to do some more changes to those based on other things, depending on how some legislation shakes out. So I would encourage you all to review that delegation of authority as well. As we've done today, it is also your role to develop and monitor a set of financial performance and accountability measures for the university, including reporting requirements and evaluation mechanisms. And then making sure that you use your oversight authority to look at controls, internal, external controls, safeguards, protecting our institutional assets against losses, which we spent a few hours today doing. The chair of the committee should have the prerogative to defer committee actions where, in their opinion, the matters at hand is better suited for a full board conversation. And then the committee, the chair of the committee shall provide a standing report at each board meeting as to the committee's activities in the interim. So as a good practice, KB, since this is your first one, what we tend to do is make sure that we have a few bullet points to remind our chair so that the chair can report out at the full board meeting. And then, of course, if there's additional questions, the chair could call you up or Camry or any of your team up. You know, obviously, we'll coordinate with your team beforehand to make sure that we can get the information that the full board needs. So operating budget and general finance issues. So this committee is responsible for the management of the ongoing financial and administrative affairs of the university. So more of those hygiene items, we're the ones who look at enterprise, or FAC is the one that looks at enterprise risk posed by but not limited to capital projects, debt, and budget allocations. They oversee the tuition and fee approval process, which we did today. And some of that language there is consistent with state law. So we want to be really mindful if we're going to change some of that language, because we have to ensure that resident student access and affordability are maximized to the extent feasible by meeting the board's affordability goals and ensuring student participation in that process, et cetera, et cetera. Interestingly enough, those state laws are for the undergrad tuition, but not necessarily for the graduate tuition. So we have a little more flexibility there. You obviously all have oversight of the graduation committee or tuition as well. And then this is the committee that reviews and recommends the annual operating budget and recommends it to the board. Traditionally, we do that twice a year. I think that might be a conversation to review how we do that, if it makes sense to just do it once or continue that twice a year. So that could be a part of that conversation as we move forward with our charter. We look at the quarterly budget management reports as well as the annual audits, making sure that we're on target to hit those budgets. And then we approve treasury management policies and contracts, as we partially did today. We also review the board bond sales, issuing determinants that a project is self-supported, self-liquidating when applicable, and all of that good stuff. And we review recommend the board investment policy guidelines for the quasi-endowment. Again, we did that today, and we get consistent updates of the performance of the quasi-endowment, and it sounds like that might change how we do that. So we want to make sure that that's reflected in our charter. Capital budget issues. You all, through the delegation of authority, we do review and recommend the board capital construction budgets that's outlined by the delegation of authority. You all get the first shot at what we approve, what we put forward to the HEC as our capital construction projects. So KB, Rebecca, and the team come to you all first, that'll be next year as we develop our asks for the next legislative biennium. And you all get that oversight first and then recommend that to the board. And then if there's any property, sale or transfers of interest, you're all have that oversight here before going to the full board. Business operations provide oversight of the procurement and contracting policies. I think it's important to remember the ship versus the helicopter kind of deal. The day-to-day is the VP and the president and their teams, but you're overseeing the policies around those authorities, including what's consistent with state law preference, including to minority, women-owned, and emerging small businesses. Veterans are involved in there too, so we should look at that language to make sure that that's consistent. and making sure that we give preferential treatment to small businesses that qualify, as well as we're following all the procurement laws of the state of Oregon, and you're providing oversight over the WOU risk management policies. All right. One more, and then the rest are pretty boilerplate, which is the cybersecurity and emergency preparedness. Our public safety and our emergency management team is under finance and administration. So you have the oversight of that. Through that includes oversight of security, cybersecurity, campus security, annual security and fire safety reports required by Clery, and emergency management plans. So those are all in your jurisdiction. Again, as a reminder, the helicopter and the battleship, you oversee the policies and procedures, and then we carry out the day-to-day as senior leadership under the president. Organization, we're supposed to have 5 members of this committee. We'll soon get back up to 5 members. You have you also have, as your staff liaison here, KB, who's our Vice President for Finance and Administration, as well as KB's team. You're required to meet 4 times a year. You can have special meetings based on our bylaws, and I won't get into that because of time. Agenda minutes and reports. In an ideal world, we'll get the agenda out to you a week before the meeting. We did pretty good this time, although we had to add a little bit at the end, but we did pretty good. We'll try to get there as quick as possible. And with the new recording laws, and we'll make sure we add that to it. We also are going to put the recordings on the website within 7 business days of the meeting. And do you have any quick questions that we can do some background research on and bring back to you for the next meeting that you want as part of this charter?
Well, Evan, you had some good prompts for us in here. Will you be able to do like the first red line approach in the Google shared document? And if you can't, answer the question yourself, prompt us to try to answer it.
Yeah. I think I could work with KB to walk through the charter and make sure that we're updating the things that we need to update compliance wise, with make sure we're consistent with state law. No problem.
Okay. And then there's probably some linkage to the EGTC charter discussion we had too. So I'm gonna have to think about that some more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, especially around integrating it into the strategic plan and making sure that our strategic plan is shines through our charter,
And the risk management
the
components.
risk management conversation for sure.
Okay. Other committee member comments, questions? Well, whew, that was quite a meeting, everybody. We have 4 minutes to spare. Thank you all for your endurance and your attention. And KB, welcome again. It's wonderful to have you. Congratulations again to Rebecca. Thank you, Evan. I know you're wearing many hats. So, but I feel like we're in a good position for the upcoming board meeting, and I will look forward to seeing you all then.
Thank you.
And with that, we are adjourned at 4:57 p.m.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.